with more theories and mysteries from the largest Pokemon Iceberg I have ever seen in my life. From the fun theories like Allistor being a Yamask and the Soak move being inspired by how Pikachu defeated Onix, to the lore of Ash harnessing the power of Infinity Energy and the true original plan of what happened to animals in the Pokemon world. We'll talk about the many other mysteries that include what is Lance's kill count, is Claydoll actually based on Celesteela, how Lanturns can destroy the universe, and how the Hex Maniac is related to the riches in Unova, the God Stone of Unova, and so much more. So prepare yourself for the next set of over 100 different mysteries and theories of the ultimate Pokemon Iceberg. Hello there, I'm Kurlik, and we're back with part 2 of the Iceberg. Whether you've heard these theories or not, I intend to bring new light and a personal touch to them as we explore Pokemon and all the fun, crazy, and mysterious happenings revolving around its world. This will include stuff from the games, anime, movies, real life, and everything in between. I do have the Iceberg linked below if you do want to follow along. We are in the 3rd out of, I believe, 9 different tiers that I have to get through. And just for the sake of entertainment and my own sanity, I won't waste any time with anything that is boring to me or just an extension of a theory that we've already talked about. For example, I'm not wasting any time with anything along the lines of, oh, Lily from the games likes Ash, or the main character, or whatever you want to say. Also won't talk about the possibility of Champion Older being the legendary hero of Hisui, since we actually discussed that in the more shallow theory of him being related to the hero. I'll just skip over anything related to things we've already talked about to save time, in other words. Finally, of course, if there are any theories that I could not dig into on my own, I do give credit to others who have already done that and add in my own little bits of info here and there, while also ensuring that if I can't answer any questions whatsoever, then maybe I'll make it into its own entire video. So how about we start with our tier 3, with the first mystery being that Pokemon don't lay eggs. It is canonical that people have never seen a Pokemon lay an egg, and as a side note, for anyone who states Pokemon canonically don't poop, you are wrong. Guzzlord doesn't. Yet it is confirmed that Pokemon such as Wingull, Tartanair, Darumaka, and others do in fact defecate. It's a weird pet peeve of mine to have information incorrectly stated and people say it's fact when that is not the case. But back to eggs, no matter how much people try, we can never see a Pokemon actually lay an egg. Nor have we ever actually seen Pokemon mate, for that matter. Not that I want to, as that makes me very uncomfortable, yet we have seen them fall in love, and we know which Pokemon are in the same egg group, which can result in an egg being created. Honestly, that's the best way to put it. Eggs are created within the world of Pokemon. We see Arceus even create an egg and gift it to us in the event of gifting us Giratina, Dialga, or Palkia. In addition, we can assume that the eggs that Chansey gives us are different from regular Pokemon eggs, and even the legendary birds have been shown to come from eggs within the original Pokemon Snap. Now, I do have an entire video explaining Pokemon eggs, so I'm not going to explain everything here, but I will at least note the following. Pokemon do not always hatch from eggs. Hatch, specifically. They seem to evolve from eggs. In addition, I've been told, but never can find it myself, that there is one instance in which a baby Pokemon is seen to be opening up an egg and stepping inside at the daycare, sealing itself inside. And finally, much like in real life, Pokemon can in fact understand the outside world from within their egg. To explain this further, because I said it's just like real life, there were tests basically being done on chicken eggs. They had a strawberry sense being around a certain group of them, and when they hatched, they liked the strawberry scented water more than regular water, meaning that they can perceive the outside world from within an egg, and that is a huge boon when it comes to survival. So if you wanted to learn more about eggs, go check out my video on that. Otherwise, let's get into pronouncing Arceus. I'm only spending time on this one because of the sheer amount of comments in which people still tell me how to say words with my face mouth hole. Arceus, according to Bulbapedia, may be a combination of Arche, ancient Greek for origin and authority, or Alpha and Deus, Latin for God, or Zeus, king of the gods in Greek mythology. It may also involve Arcane, Aureus, Latin for golden, Arcesso, Latin for I summon, Arceus, an aspect of the astral plane, or Chaos, the origin state of the universe in Greek mythology, often personified as the first primordial deity. Because of this, despite the anime pronouncing Arceus, it is incredibly funny to consider the idea that the joke way of saying Arceus, Arceus, thanks to Zeus, is more correct than actually saying Arceus. And I hope that gives an aneurysm to some people. That sounds amazing. Anywho, let's move on to Giovanni wanted to stop Mewtwo. At first, this seems incredibly stupid, but let's have some fun and consider 3 bits of information that we know about Giovanni. He likes power, and if he does not have it, he will take it. 2. Mewtwo escaped from the Team Rocket lab and was destroying other towns and cities, at least within the manga. And 3. Giovanni is by all means an intelligent and competent mob boss that did love his family, even if he was terrible at showing it. And he loved his Pokemon as well, unlike his mother. Through our understanding of these facts, despite Giovanni being a very evil individual, he would know that a life form with power greater than anything found in nature, which are the words used to describe Mewtwo, is a menace and a danger. Something that would not only destroy everything that it goes near, but could also destroy Team Rocket, his own family, his riches, his power, and anyone or anything that Giovanni could be ruling over for that matter. Because of this, understanding Mewtwo must be caught for the sake of his own future, a selfish gain. He would then seek out the Master Ball to ensure Mewtwo could be caught. It's very possible that Giovanni did want to actually stop Mewtwo. Again, not out of benevolence though, but simply out of selfish reasons, for the same reasons that he created Mewtwo in the first place. We're going to skip past a number of the entries here that are thoroughly discussed already and jump to a stupid and fun one, being that Dodrio Flying. Yes, as seen in many of the memes, Doduo and Dodrio can in fact learn the move Fly and are able to fly. What makes this funnier is that literally every single creature that it's based on, the dodo, the kiwi, ostriches, emus, moas, none of them, to my knowledge, are able to fly. Yet Doduo and Dodrio can in fact fly. It's just a weird gag that Pokemon has done in the end, whether it just spins its heads or manages to glide through the air similar to a Mantine or Emolga for that matter, is unknown as it's not been shown. This is just one shallow mystery that I hope never gets directly answered, because I love how fun and stupid it is. SS and Policeman was Looker. An undercover international police agent who has the appearance of a gentleman appears on the SS and in pursuit of Team Rocket. In Generations 1 and 3, International Police is translated as Global Police, which they are fairly interchangeable. We only know of a few members of the International Police, and only 2 of them that we know of are male. These being Looker, who first appeared in Pokemon Platinum, and Nanu, who first appeared in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Otherwise, we know none of the other members of the International Police, so sure, I guess it could be Looker. It could be Nanu, considering that, I don't know, he had a connection to Giovanni, as discussed in the last Iceberg portions. Ultimately, not a super deep one to expand on, but one I couldn't just skip. Giratina and Necrozma Abrahamic symbolism. So, for those of you that do not know, as I did not quite understand what this was without the definition, Abrahamic symbolism refers to the shared roots and distinct differences of the 3 Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These religions believe in a separate individual God and the universe. They share concepts like heaven, hell, resurrection, and judgment, and that varies. So again, this is just general, with respect, descriptions. The Abrahamic religions claim the prophet Abraham as their common forefather. What this is trying to say is how Giratina and Necrozma are actually supposed to, within the Bible, represent Lucifer, or in other words, the devil. Of course, everyone throughout the world and throughout time have always said how Giratina is not just a silly little noodle, but is in fact the representation of the devil. But the Necrozma comparison may be new to you, so let's just begin with the basic explanation of Lucifer, which, again, this is not a Bible study, this is just to get our point across. Lucifer was described in a number of different ways: the prince of angels, the most beautiful of angels, given wisdom and intelligence in great amounts, but yet rebelled against God and was cast from God's realm. Eventually, Lucifer would create and essentially rule over hell, and this should all sound familiar to you. As Giratina was created by Arceus, god of the Pokemon world, Its origin form is also very serpentine, like the snake that would tempt Eve to eat the apple that would grant knowledge, amongst many other things. Giratina would also be the only Pokemon of our origin trio that cannot be controlled or calmed by Mesprit, Uxie, or Azelf, who are by all means very reminiscent of the highest 3 angels under God's power, thus putting Giratina technically above the Lake Guardians, giving us that Prince of Angels idea. Giratina would eventually attack the other Pokemon and be banished by Arceus into its own dimension that Giratina would culture and protect, the Distortion or Mirror World, depending on what lore you go with. Now, I do talk about all this in far more detail in my Pokemon Myth and Legendary Family Tree video, alongside with how every single, well, legendary mythical Pokemon is related, expanding on their inspirations as well. But maybe one day I'll create smaller, more detailed videos explaining sections of that info, because it is in there as well that I talk about Necrozma being very much related to Lucifer as well. Necrozma, no matter the lore, was once known as the Blinding One. No Pokemon could compare to the light that it brings, and through its many wings, incandescence that would make Solaire weep, and immense power, we can already begin to see the connections. In fact, we have a transformation through the fall of Necrozma, as whether it be the residents of Ultra Megalopolis, the old Recon Squad, or the meteor that would strike it, Necrozma would lose its light and fall. Its form would even change as this occurs, becoming a darkened husk of what it used to be. So ultimately, with the understanding of it all, yeah, it all seems to click together too well for it to be deemed a coincidence. This isn't uncommon to see in Pokemon as a whole, considering the many legendaries, mythicals, and even more common Pokemon and their inspirations likely being from real life religions and myth. It adds a nice layer to all that I really love, and as such, I personally consider this theory to be mostly true. With that though, if somehow you aren't subscribed and yet are watching this second half, not even second half, this is like part 2 of what will probably be 4 or 5, because this is ridiculous. But if you're somehow watching this and you're not subscribed yet, please ensure that you do subscribe, share this video with others, share the channel with others, and you could go as far as becoming a member for as little as $3 a month to then get behind the scenes content, get special questions answered to you directly on those special behind the scenes posts, and see what my plans are, in addition to getting your name shouted out in the credits of every single video, as $3 a month even does a massive amount for this channel. With that then, once again, thank you, and back to the video. Evil Pokemon exist. I will say 100% that this is true. This is primarily an anime-based theory, though you can look at the Pokédex for that matter as well. You can argue that Pokemon such as Hydreigon or Pumpkaboo are acting out of instinct, destructive creatures or soul-stealing creatures acting on simply that need to eat, or because of nature forcing them to be the way that they are. Though Pokemon that are known to be incredibly intelligent, yet are still destructive or experiment on other Pokemon, such as Metagross or Galarian Slowking in that respective order, are very much evil, and nobody can convince me otherwise. And just in case you're unaware of what I consider to be the most evil Pokemon in all of existence, allow me to read the Galarian Slowking's information directly. It creates potions by mixing toxins with the food it's eaten. Not even Slowking itself knows what effects the potions will have. It administers its potions to weakened Pokemon it sees. These potions are derived from poison and secreted from holes in Slowking's horns. Those, again, are direct entries from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Galarian Slowking is a war criminal. He is evil. It's evil, and you can't convince me otherwise. De-evolution. I assume this is just referencing the many cases within the world of Pokemon in which Pokemon have devolved. The most obvious of cases being actually whenever any of Slowpoke's evolutions lose their Cloyster, returning them back to Slowpoke. And other cases would actually include whenever a head from Executor falls, the fallen head becomes an Execute and must find its full group of 6 again. Kyogre and Groudon technically devolve due to their origin forms. Eevee in the manga switches between all of its forms and its base form thanks to genetic modification from Team Rocket. Melmetal can break down to Meltan, type Full is restrained through its helmet and becomes type Null, and then Dialga straight up reverses time on Pokemon to turn them all back into eggs. Outside of these instances, the only other case of de-evolution are the Devolution Orb in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon and the de-evolution Spray in the Pokemon trading card game. Otherwise, it is deemed impossible to devolve a Pokemon. Despite that, though, I can guarantee that Team Rocket could have done it, since we see many cases where Pokemon are medically forced to evolve. It is an interesting thing to consider all in all, and I've started to wonder if there's a chance that since Pokemon such as Gyarados traditionally evolved down into Magikarp over time, as normal animals would, what other cases could there be? Could the Mega Pokemon have been the original Pokemon in some point in time? After all, Mega Aerodactyl is said to be how Aerodactyl used to look. Its genetic DNA being fully revived, essentially. Just something interesting to consider that I'm gonna toss in. Anime is an in-universe cartoon. I was gonna skip this, but there are two instances that are at least fun to mention that are head nods to the anime. One being that there have been characters in the games that end up having Pokemon from the anime. This is through mostly special events, of course, as is the case with Ash's Greninja. Another case is the Kangaskhan, which has an entry about it adopting a human child, specifically within the Pokemon Sword Pokédex, and this happens in the anime within the old Safari Zone with a character named Tommy, who was accidentally dropped from a helicopter from his father. Dad of the year, right there. Now, I mean, sure. Why not? The anime could be an in-universe cartoon, or the anime could actually theoretically exist within the game as a real-life thing, thanks to Ash having his Pikachu given to us as another event Pokemon time and time again, alongside his Greninja as well, of course. I'm primarily stating this so that way we don't have to talk about these theories when they do pop up, because they kind of bore me and are one note. Heart Gold Soul Silver Giovanni drowned. As after Giovanni trembles from defeat, he states the precious dream of Team Rocket has been nothing but an illusion. He makes his leave, but instead of hearing the normal walking out of cave sound, we instead will hear a splash sound followed up by dead silence. As Giovanni's secret hideout was in Tojo Falls, the entrance was directly next to the rapid waters, and he could have... yeah, you can kind of see where that's going. So, after the splash sound, there are radio signals from the Goldenrod Radio Tower Team Rocket members who state, or rather ask, where has Giovanni gone? I wonder if he's coming. As if to give you the assumption that he has forever vanished, though at the same time, he probably doesn't want to go back to them. And we know for a fact that none of this is true in terms of him dying, as he does return in Pokemon Black 2 White 2 for the World Leaders Tournament, announced as the self-proclaimed strongest trainer. Don't get me wrong, it's hard to deny the idea of Giovanni having given up after constant defeat by the hands of children, but at the same time, Giovanni is a man of ambition. He exists to become stronger, and while he gives up on Team Rocket, I can assure that he's far too focused on his own power to simply give up. Thus, his title in Black 2 White 2. Levels don't determine evolution. I've stated this one many times before, and it is very much true if we were to read Dex entries. Bug Pokemon Eating, former Chrysalis, and Metamorphose being a great example of this. Cubone being said to evolve into Marowak when it no longer cries, and I mean even Cosmog and Cosmoem are said to evolve via level, but they just need to consume enough space dust, essentially. So yeah, again, this ties into other ones that I really do want to put on their side and make an entire video about, because there is a lot more to cover and it sounds really fun to me. Ash's Pikachu lost weight. Pikachu losing the chubbiness has always been a constantly brought up thing within the world of Pokemon. The reason was likely just to make sure that he was easier to draw while giving him a more distinct shape compared to other Pokemon. That way he isn't just round with short appendages, but it's actually a toss-up since it was never actually explained. Honestly speaking, even the reanimated scene of Pikachu meeting Ash shows that Pikachu is not the chubbier version, and it just has a very pouty face as Ash holds him. And the only instance we get of our chubby Pikachu ever again is simply when we get to see Gigantamax in the anime. Because I know someone's going to start typing, Giga and Giant are the words that help make up Gigantamax, or Gigantamax if I say it that way at any point, making both ways to say it acceptable. I mean, the anime says Gigantamax, but I really don't care. Pokerus. So this one's one I've talked about many a times before. Pokerus being the microscopic organisms that find themselves upon your Pokemon and are able to help them gain, I believe it's EVs, a lot faster. In which case, we can assume that they're genetically modifying your Pokemon. They also continue to do so even after the Pokerus is gone. Pokerus cannot be cured, and it is something that has to pass over time. I've seen that some people may state that they're similar to mitochondria, and how when they first worked with bacteria way in the very beginning of everything, a cell literally looked at another bacteria and went, yo, what if I did all the work for you? And it said, sure, which makes no sense in terms of self-preservation, because you're letting another creature inside of you to hopefully not kill you. And, well, the mitochondria, in fact, did not do that. It then proceeded to do all the work, and then the cell could differentiate through all of its different methods, all the different things that it basically had to do. I'm very much oversimplifying what that process was, but that's basically what it is, and that's basically what Pokerus could be. It could also be some sort of ancient bacteria, ancient virus that is going to sit within a Pokemon and hopefully not activate and cause immense damage, because even in the manga, they help Pokemon evolve faster. So Pokerus is a huge mystery, a huge potential scare, or it's just basically mitochondria but for Pokemon. Imposter Oak. Imposter Oak is something that, if you've never read the manga, throws everyone through a loop, because you see an evil looking Professor Oak. Whether that be on the card, you might see an Imposter Oak in the anime as James then, well, imposterizes, pretends to be Professor Oak at one point, or alternatively, you do see it in the manga, in which case, an Alakazam from Sabrina was pretending to be Professor Oak himself. Now, this is something that could have had a lot more potential, could have gone a lot further in the anime or other versions, as it did seem that Imposter Professor Oak was supposed to be in the games or a game at one point. But at this point, it's something that very well may be left in the past and is not going to be expanded on. Parasect Zombie. Parasect, we know their information, and everyone's like, okay, yeah, they're basically zombies at this point. You can see as Paras evolves into Parasect, then it loses the coloration in its eyes, they're completely blank now, and the mushroom has grown larger. And at the same time, Parasect will actively take the Tochikasu mushrooms and sprinkle the spores onto its babies, so that way they grow the mushrooms and eventually, continue to spread, and those mushrooms then control our Pokemon into going after roots of trees in order to get nutrients, or go into very humid areas, which are perfect for mushrooms to actually grow. Well, humid and warm climated areas. In addition, if you look at the beta sprite, you can see that Paras did have a baby form that when it hatches, it does not have the mushrooms on its back whatsoever. So that leads from no mushroom, spores, and a few mushrooms to eventually fully evolving into one giant parasitic mushroom that turns Parasect into a walking zombie, essentially. And this isn't unscarily, this is not something that is uncommon even in the real world, as there are a number of parasites that may control the mind, or at least kind of shift the mind to want to do different things. Girl in the OP. This references the girl that Pikachu runs under in the anime opening, and this was something that I thought would lead nowhere, and then I found out that, in fact, it does lead nowhere. It is another old Japanese joke. The lyrics we know state he'll hunt for Pokemon through fire, water, and grass, hence the 3 evolved starters, but then originally it was added and then under a girl's skirt. Wouldn't be the first time a skirt joke was being censored within Pokemon, and I understand it. I was really secretly hoping that this would go down a rabbit hole of actually finding out that she was a scrapped character that was going to be super important in a whole arc, similar to the GS Ball situation, but nope, skirt joke. Humans becoming ghost Pokemon. This is actually, once again, one that I won't dive deep into because I've already covered this in an entire video called The Stolen Afterlife of Pokemon. Because while yes, there are plenty of people that become Pokemon, there are Pokemon becoming ghosts, souls being eaten, and basically barred from the afterlife, and even ghost Pokemon themselves dying. The afterlife of Pokemon kinda sucks, so if you want answers, go check that out. Calyrex Blue Dynamax. As opposed to every other Pokemon that Dynamaxes and gains the red aura to their outline, Calyrex turns blue. I didn't know about this before reading, so yeah, it is really odd. So let's gather some evidence and try to come to a conclusion. Based on history of Galar, we know that Calyrex existed within the world before Eternatus and its max form crash landed. We know that all other Pokemon here derive their energy from Eternatus, or at least the fragments that broke off from Eternatus that would later be known as Wishing Stars, or even the Pokemon Dens themselves that would allow them to Dynamax or Gigantamax. Calyrex has very nature-derived abilities. Its right hand can cause the land to be covered in verdant grass and blooms, while its left hand allows it to make fields of fruit ripen and become heavy. It can see through all of time, past, present, and future, take control of bodies and minds. It stopped the meteor that Eternamax came down in from destroying the kingdom, and is arguably one of the most intelligent Pokemon while also speaking the human language. I will note in there, it also fought with Zacian and Zamazenta, amongst other Pokemon, to stop Eternamax. And of course, it combines with Glastrier or Spectrier for even more power. On Calyrex's beads, we find a familiar symbol that we know in the modern day as the Triforce. You know, from The Legend of Zelda, as you may know it from. In real life, though, the symbol was said to represent peace and prosperity, and considering Calyrex brought peace to the people of Galar through taming our unruly steeds, and ruled over the people in peace while also being able to bring prosperity through its control of vegetation, we can see how that actually connects. There's also a joke to be made here about blue-blooded, which is something that is used to describe royalty. Though this is what I believe. Calyrex clearly doesn't derive its Dynamax power from Eternatus, but rather it likely derives it from itself or the land. Additionally, I would be willing to bet that Calyrex even created the tree where we find the legendary birds of Galar, and it is there in which Calyrex transformed them into their current known forms. Calyrex has a ridiculous amount of power, very God on Earth style, which is very interesting despite the very much not talked about DLC of those games, which is a little bit of a shame, but oh well. Rui sensing shadow Pokemon. Rui is from Colosseum, a mysterious young girl with psychic abilities. She is Wes's friend and the sidekick and deuteragonist? That's a weird word. In Pokemon Colosseum. She's determined, caring, and brave, but can be a bit bossy and stubborn at times. During the plot of the game, she was even kidnapped to ensure the plans of Ein and Cypher weren't revealed and stopped relating to the Shadow Pokemon. Although Shadow Pokemon are usually indistinguishable from the regular kind to normal people, Rui is able to sense the black aura surrounding them, although the reason as to why she is able to see this aura is never explained in the games. Using this ability, Rui is able to identify shadow Pokemon so that Wes can snag and eventually purify them. Rui does specifically call them Pokemon that have been turned into fighting machines with hearts of darkness. The Heart of Darkness concept is something that extends even into the anime with Colress, as he draws upon the anger and evil within a Pokemon, stating how it will make them reach the peak of their own power. And between Ein and Colress having been made connections between each other in the past and just seeing how they look similar, it allows us to assume that it is anger that does drive shadow Pokemon. In addition, the way to purify a shadow Pokemon is by treating them with kindness, thus reopening their heart, or having Celebi purify them directly. I've assumed that with Celebi being a Pokemon of healing and time travel, that it could simply heal the broken heart of a Pokemon, reversing the damage and thus purifying them. To clarify and help us find better parameters of how we do this without Celebi, the following actions will open the door to a Pokemon's heart by varying amounts. Sending a Shadow Pokemon into battle, calling a Shadow Pokemon out of Hyper Mode or Reverse Mode in battle, walking with a Shadow Pokemon in the party, walking with a Shadow Pokemon in a daycare in Pokemon Coliseum only, using scents on a Shadow Pokemon like smelling, placing a Shadow Pokemon in the Purification Chamber in Pokemon XD only. So it really is just kindness in repeated action that heals the heart. Almost like that's how it works in real life. Though none of this answers how Rui can see Shadow Pokemon. The closest I can get to an answer is that a character by the name of Michael can use what is called an aura reader to see the Shadow aura. In which case, the only assumption we can make from here is that Rui can see the auras of Pokemon in general. This isn't unheard of. After all, many Pokemon such as Lucario can sense aura, Ash has the ability to see auras in the anime, and we'll talk about that later, and there are some other characters that can see aura through their fighting types or psychic typing. So, Rui can see auras a lot more clean-cut than expected, and it just was never fully or directly explained. Player's original life. This all refers to PMD, or Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, where you as the main character directly state how you used to be human. Each of the games suggests different reasons for being transported into the world, being transformed and sent to the world in order to save everyone, but it never fully answers what your original life was. It is suggested that humans exist within the PMD world, even being directly stated how Gengar in one game was the wrongful human who hurt Ninetales and as such was cursed and transported into this world, not the player character as it was once rumored. Though this is just something that creates more questions. Where are the humans then? And what powers does Ninetales have in secret to have not only transformed others, but transported them here? Theories have ranged from humans not being in the Mystery Dungeon world, to the MD world being a parallel universe, or even that humans have gone extinct. We're gonna just Occam's razor this. The simplest answer is often the most correct answer. Through the power of various immensely powerful Pokemon, you as the player are transformed and transported into the faraway lands in which Pokemon Mystery Dungeon events occur. These lands have been entirely untouched by mankind. This is something that exists in real life, whether we look at largely uninhabited islands such as the Namib Desert or various islands that people just flat out do not go to due to the sheer amount of danger imposed. It's important to remember that Pokemon are very dangerous creatures, no matter how cute they are. For example, a Phanpy can break every bone in your arm with a playful swing of its trunk, not when it's using an attack-based move, when it is playing. So imagine what an entire island of Pokemon who have been isolated for all of known history would do to a person trying to explore. They will be defensive, they will be protective, leading to, potentially, your untimely demise. This doesn't necessarily answer any questions about what happened to your original life, but either time is paused, as we can see happen within some of the games, or your friends and family will never see you again as you have been brought in for a higher calling. Assuming you just never go back, that is. So, take your pick. Anime films canonicity. That is a whole mess I'm not actually going to touch. A lot of the films and anime line up for the most part, with a few exceptions all in all, that have very negligible differences, with exception to a few movies which change things vastly, at least visually. It's really not worth going through, especially as someone who believes that even in a full story, there is always a grain of truth that can lead us to the answers that we seek. So, let's move on to Mewtwo is based on Gigas? What is that? What is Gigas? Oh, it's Gigas from Earthbound. That very terrifying creature. Known as both the embodiment of evil and the universal cosmic destroyer, Gigas is an evil alien who, upon failing his original mission to reclaim the knowledge of psionic power, from humans, intends to sentence all reality to the horror of infinite darkness. With an army of starmen, Octobots, and other deadly war machines, Gigas also uses his immense power to influence certain Earthlings to his system, such as Pokeminch and Geldegard Mundatoli. Well, whatever. His influence also causes animals and people to become violent and distressed. He belongs to the race of aliens who originally had the power of Psi and, for unknown reasons, abducted humans in the 1900s and 1980X. From the rest of what I read, it turns out that his physical and mental condition declined rapidly over time, resulting in having few emotions left, such as fear. Otherwise, this Gygas loses all sense of guilt and restraint, becoming far more destructive. The only way to stop him forever was through an active positive emotion. In this case, it was praying, which brought about his end, praying from the world of people. In concept, Gygas was created to be like a living being that deserves love. And would you look at that? The wiki of Earthbound itself states the following as theoretical information. Some fans have noted a resemblance between Gygas' sprite in Earthbound Beginnings and Mewtwo from the Pokemon series, and that they both are shown to have powerful psychic abilities. It is also interesting to note that Ape Inc., who worked on Earthbound Beginnings, later became Creatures Inc., one of the main developers of the Pokemon series. And there it is. Whether Mewtwo is based on Gygas or not is irrelevant. You can start to see where those emotional connections are. A creature that was tortured in its life, or just was unfortunate in its life, doing evil deeds. Yet, it is when a moment of kindness is brought to this monster, this demon of hatred, that love wins, I guess, just to be corny about it. Love wins and life changes, and it's something that is transformative to these creatures. In the case of Gygas, he passes. In the case of Mewtwo, it becomes a little bit more of a protector, a little bit more kind. It all depends on the world or the manga and anime versions that you may be looking at. Ryuki's home region. Ryuki is a rock musician who has traveled to Alola from another region beyond the sea in order to spread his fame. He is one of the trainers who can challenge a player for the title of Pokemon Champion in Pokemon League rematches in Pokemon Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon. In Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, Ryuki also sometimes appears as the Cantonian Gym in Melee City, or in there, not as the gym, oh my goodness, where he can be battled, although defeating him is not necessary to complete the Cantonian Gym challenge. After being defeated for the first time, he gives the player a Dragon Scale. He also promises to become a Dragon-type gym leader once real gyms start appearing in Alola. On the surface, this seems easy, because when we look at all of his Pokemon teams, he's always prepared with a Garchomp, or at least a Gabite, and then the anime, he is the leader of the Cantonian Gym while only having a Zweilous and then Druddigon. Then in the manga, he only has his Alola Pokemon, and of course Master ZX has him stating that he visited Alola, Johto, and Unova, which... Why is this so complicated? Why is this so inconsistent? I may as well add in there that in his concept art, he's shown having an Aerodactyl. The Cantonian Gym in the games is modeled after the Vermilion City Gym, where we find Lieutenant Surge, but then in the anime, it is modeled after assumptions about what gyms are like in Kanto, which sounds exactly like what a place that idolizes the concept of gyms or other ideas from other countries would do. Ryuki is so much harder to place than I initially thought, but we can at least narrow it down to Kanto and Sinnoh because of all of that information, with my bets being on Kanto because of the funny little Aerodactyl he has in his concept art. SS Victini event. This one took a little bit of digging, but this turns out to be Signa Suit's Hilda and Victini event. And I'm a little concerned with little to no answers on this one, because in her mindscape of other versions, we see a place that I cannot find anywhere within Unova, no matter how hard I try to search. But what we do see is that when she has the Victini, the place is on fire. This palace-looking Roman place is in flames. So wherever this is, they are not having a good time, and it seems a little strange to think that a hero character would just burn a place down for that matter, though it doesn't seem like anything's destroyed or anything's melting, so maybe it's just a visual additive to it. It's still very strange. I'll be real, this one has me stumped, and there's no real leads that I have on this. Because if this has nothing to do with the Signa suit, then I really have no idea what this is supposed to mean. So, honestly, if this is a great time for me to actually just state, if you have differing opinions, or if you have any ideas that may, go a different direction from what I say or what I find, or anything that you really like out of all this, throw it in the comments below. I read all the comments. Even if I don't respond to them all, I usually at least heart react to them. And if I don't, it's because I either A, don't know how to respond, or B, I'm just thinking of an answer and I'm letting it, you know, marinate within this brain of mine. So if you have any ideas for any of these or any other, like I said, contradicting opinions, let me know. Vacant Kanto champion before Blue. Lance is always seen as the champion, but in reality, he was originally just part of the Elite Four. You beat him, he says you would have been champion, but another defeated him first. You then find out that Blue is waiting for you inside the championship room. Originally, Professor Oak was meant to be the champion before the idea was scrapped, leaving this whole thing wide open to speculation. Though it is through the Pokemon Let's Go games that we get the following. Professor Oak says that previously, trainers who beat the Elite Four were recorded as champions. However, starting from this point on, the rules were changed, so that champion is now also part of the Pokemon League Challenge, meaning that now a trainer must defeat both the Elite Four and the reigning champion in order to become the new true champion. So, there were likely other champions, but none of them stayed due to the rules at the time. Who those champions were may be a mystery, but we've already talked about the strong possibility of Oak having been a champion thanks to the manga, which would also help explain why he is not the champion, waiting after the Elite Four to battle you. Meaning that, unexpected to me, the Let's Go games actually line up with the manga to some capacity. Pokemon can fuse. Under rare circumstances, some Pokemon have been known to combine with other Pokemon, or even people for that matter. This phenomenon, sometimes called fusion, has appeared across various Pokemon media, including the games, animation, and the manga. We have the Tau Trio, which, yeah, they used to be a singular dragon. We have the Cosmog line, more specifically Solgaleo and Lunala, combining with Necrozma. Calyrex, which is just riding other Pokemon, I suppose. The Beldum line, and so many more. Honestly, none of this should be a shocker to you, and I don't know why it's so deep on this list, although the reason may be because it may reference the fusion of the legendary birds in the manga thanks to the power of all 8 gym badges being used on them. Either way, it's not anything crazy that we need to spend any more time on. Firestarter's Zodiac. That's an old one. Before the advent of Generation 9 with Fuecoco, the idea was that the fire starters simply followed the Zodiac, with every single one of them lining up very clearly. This was then being used to predict what the next animal the fire starter was going to be based on. This would have been the ox, sheep, snake, and horse, but then Fuecoco came along with its adorable happiness and seemingly messed that up for anyone who fully believed in the Zodiac. And turns out that a male crocodile may be called a bull. So if you want to squeeze it, sure, it fits in. And whether this was intentionally done by Game Freak because they want to subvert expectations or simply because someone really, really loves crocodiles is something we will never know. But the world is better with Fuecoco in it, even if someone keeps just slapping craft single cheeses onto its body. I will note that Spain at that time, or just in general, I guess, in the past, had a huge thing with bullfighting. So it would have made sense for some sort of fire starter to be there. The problem with that, though, is they often killed the bull in the past there and in a lot of other places. And even if you look at Tauros, it adapted in these places, being more aggressive, probably from or in relation to these bullfights. And what does it turn into? Fire or water type, because, I mean, fire is fairly obvious, but with the water typing, the bulls would be on like this great bull run, essentially, leading down the alleys and everything, going all the way over, and it would be up to the people participating to get out of the way, as the bulls would then charge directly into the water. You can imagine where that goes afterwards. So it's probably a good thing that they didn't really throw in an actual bull starter Pokemon, considering that all 3 of the starters in Generation 9 are revolving around entertainment, dancing, music, and then theater, magicians. trickery. There it is. There, whatever you want to say for Meowsquared, I suppose. Rayquaza is in its primal form. So Groudon and Kyogre got primal forms, but big ol' Rayquaza didn't. Instead, it got a mega form. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I had to look at an old Loxton and Noggin video just to refresh me on this. And so that way I could actually explain it. This is easily all just explained away just by the idea that Rayquaza could already absolutely bop Kyogre and Groudon when they were in their fully powered original forms that were necessary for creating the land, or rather magma core, and the sea or water within the world of Pokemon to create the Earth. Meanwhile, Rayquaza, the sky, or rather the atmosphere, already existed. The three of them being the three key pieces of, I think, 5 that are necessary for life to flourish on a planet. And while Kyogre and Groudon lost their power after serving their purpose, it was Rayquaza who had to stay and continue its duties. That was until it had to go superpowered and not only overpower the newly souped up Primal Kyogre and Groudon, but also destroy the Delta Meteor. So, sure, if you want to be technical about it, I guess it's in its primal form, but not really. Holon Region. Holon is a region introduced and explored exclusively in the Pokemon trading card game. It is a known habitat of the unusual Delta species Pokemon, also introduced in the TCG trading card game. The Holon region was inhabited by humans seeking to utilize the mysterious energy emitted by the region's power spots. Researchers settled a village in the center of Mirage Forest, a nod to EX Legend Maker, and constructed a large tower in the center. The resulting electromagnetic waves caused the local Pokemon to mutate into abnormal types inconsistent with their genes elsewhere, with their highest evolved forms typically having metal as a type. The affected Pokemon came to be known as the Delta species. While studying these Pokemon, researchers discovered a new power, resulting in Holon's Pokemon. Further research into Delta species and Holon's Pokemon resulted in the creation of 3 variations of Holon Energy, FF, GL, and WP, which I looked into and doesn't seem to really expand any further. Now, according to the official website and artwork from TCG Products, the region is located in the center of Mirage Forest from EX Legend Maker. A lake is also bordered by a massive mountain range. Described to be beyond the horizon are a chain of islands where powerful Pokemon are said to reside, which forms the basis for much of the EX Dragon Frontiers expansion. Honestly, the only really big mystery here is simply where the region actually lies within the greater world of Pokemon and these Delta species. Otherwise, it feels more like a moot point than anything, and with the whole idea of metal and these being higher beings, or at least being evolved into their higher forms and becoming metal, it makes me question if potentially Meltan may have actually resided in the Holon region originally. Think of it this way. This is all just fun speculation at this point with no real evidence, as I just thought it up. Think of it this way. A group of ancient people who are from a faraway land that we have no idea where they're from. I've discussed how Melmetal has an unknown region, thanks to it being discovered technically in Pokemon Go, but being a metal Pokemon that became something so massive and was already a steel type being constructed of all the different, or like 2 or 3 different types of metals, it would be very, very apt to have the big Pokemon that you would quote-unquote worship, not as a god, but as a protector species, be the Pokemon that would have come from the Holon region after those descriptions. I don't know. Again, I might have just waffled all of that, but let's move on. Paldea Atlantis. I'm assuming once again this was before the DLC. I'm assuming this was bouncing off the idea that Blueberry Academy was potentially Atlantis before we found out that it was a school. And I mean, it isn't far off. It's essentially an Atlantis for Pokemon, and effectively, it could sustain people too if they managed it properly. So, who knows? Maybe if a Great War 2 happens within the world of Pokemon and everything hits the fan, they have some place to go to. Falkner is the strongest Johto gym. I can't even begin to fathom how anyone came to this idea, nor can I find any evidence, whether that be from the games or the anime, to support this idea in the slightest. The absolute closest that I can get to this is that his father, Walker, left him with Pokemon. But even as I look at Walker in the manga, his only known Pokemon is Skarmory, and he gets blasted by my boy Suicune, who is battling every single gym leader. Otherwise, this is probably just someone just sitting down and saying,
But I bet it would be cool if the weakest gym leader was actually the strongest.
which, considering the gyms in lore are suggested to base their teams on how many badges you have, it's not an impossibility with certain gym leaders, but Faulkner shows no actual evidence of being this way, unlike Katie in Generation 9, who is often told that she needs to go easy because she's supposed to be the first gym, and she's like, but I want to beat them down. I want to grab these children and throw them into the horizon. Let me use my bug types to do it. Ransei is a super continent. Ransei is the name of the region that appears in the game Pokemon Conquest. It is inspired by feudal Japan. Oh my goodness. The region is divided into 17 kingdoms, each with its own castle. The region of Ransei is said to have been created by a mythical Pokemon, Arceus, which the shape of the region itself resembles. Thank you for being vain, my dear one of the 1,000 arms. Legend says that conquering all 17 kingdoms will bring forth the return of Arceus. It is the only region in which humans are known to transform, quote-unquote, to become more powerful in a manner similar to the evolution of their Pokemon partners. The theory, then, is that Ransei was the original supercontinent in the Pokemon world, similar to Pangea Ultima in real life. What's interesting, then, is that this is quite literally, again, just Japan transported into Pokemon, where Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh are very much based on Japan and have the locations included within them from real life inspiration. Ransei is quite literally just feudal Japan. We even have Nobunaga, not a Nobunaga-like character in, name, no, literally Warlord Nobunaga equipped with Zekrom, though there is a twist in the story that I won't mention here. The important thing to understand is that this would have all occurred within the year 1582, placing it in the timeline before the events of Pokemon Legends Arceus. And to be fair, the Pokemon timeline seems to follow well with the real world timeline somehow. So sure, maybe Ransei was the supercontinent, especially as there has been some visual evidence that when properly sectioned off, as I'll show here, we can see where each modern region may have actually been before its division, including even side game regions for that matter. I wonder if that might mean that the Celestica people could be traced back to one of these kingdoms. Or maybe these were the original Celestica people, I don't even know. One last point to think about is that Pangea was not the first supercontinent. There were ones that existed beforehand, broke apart, smashed together, Pangea was created, and then from there, things broke apart over time to be more akin to what we know of. So who knows? Maybe Ransei is Pangea, maybe Ransei is Gondwana, maybe it's one of the many other supercontinents that predated or were technically a part of Pangea. The possibilities are out there, and the more I think about this, the more I'm willing to take this idea that Ransei was a supercontinent or was the supercontinent before the modern events into a personal truth or my own headcanon. Especially if it means that we can find out more about the Celestica people if we can find all of these ties. And I do want to note now before we move on that if it wasn't for Pokemon Conquest, there was supposed to be a Pokemon and Fire Emblem crossover that did not happen when it was initially being planned. Though, at least some of the designers from that, or one of the character designers from that, did work on the characters for Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go. Wow. So, Puka was a lowland. Puka is a blue-eyed Pikachu debuting in the episode The Pikahuna, the Big Kahuna, and is at least 20 years old, having been first found by surfing enthusiast Victor shortly after he failed to conquer a large wave, Humungadunga, otherwise known as Big Tuesday in Japan. I don't know why they called it Humungadunga, just call it Big Tuesday. Victor was trying to emulate a feat achieved by his surfing hero Jan to decades ago. It met up with Ash's Pikachu when he visited Seafoam Island with his trainer. Team Rocket spotted the two of them together and used their Gyarados submarine to snatch them. Now, according to trivia from Bulbapedia, Puka's English name comes from puka shells, which are pieces of a shell belonging to a snail. They are used to make jewelry and are very popular in Hawaii. Puka is also somewhat similar to Pika, as in Pikachu, who would have guessed. Now, Puka's Japanese name, along with Victor's Japanese name, Vincent, and Jan's name, are a reference to Hollywood actor Jan Michael Vincent, the lead actor of the movie Big Wednesday, from which their episode takes inspiration. Puka might be based on the minigame of the Surfing Pikachu, located in Pokemon Yellow in Route 19 near Seafoam Islands. Basically, while everything is very Hawaiian inspired, Puka is very much said to be caught at the Seafoam Islands. Although Pikachu are not found on those islands in any generation, there is the chance, and I mean very small chance, that a surfing Pikachu could have surfed the incredibly long distance from Alola to the Seafoam Islands. So maybe it is Alolan, I don't know. But before we do move on to the next entry, I have to admit, seeing an old Pikachu aged in ways that are more realistic, that have like the actual wear and tear of real life aging on it, rather than just having a big old bushy beard slapped onto it, kind of hits a soft, sad part. Erica and Valerie are Kimono Girls, Erica being the Grass-type gym leader from Generation 1, in addition to Valerie being the Fairy-type gym leader from Generation 6. When we look at the two of them, Valerie has always been known to have already been from the Johto area, and with her designs, with the kimono, with her Sylveon, she would fit in rather well with the Kimono Girls. And when we look at Erica, she's very much the princess. I mean, she's literally a princess. She has an Eevee in the manga, as we previously discussed. Well, the Eevee that can turn into any of the 3 other evolutions that were out at the time. She has a Vaporeon in Pokemon Stadium 2, Leafeon in Masters EX, and in the anime as well. When we look at the casual clothing, though, of the Kimono Girls in the anime, they don't really match up with any of the others, or at least these two individuals here. But I would dare say that the whole idea of Erica and Valerie being Kimono Girls or ex-Kimono Girls are possible. You know, I don't see why not, considering their connections to Eevee, and we can at least assume that they have a connection with the families of the Kimono Girls at the very least, if they weren't Kimono Girls. And because this is the perfect opportunity to lead you into it, I actually talk about the Kimono Girls, their past, and everything else, alongside the new legendary beasts that were created by Lore Keeper Toby. And yes, I did get permission from him, which was very nice. So go check out that video. I had a lot of fun making it. It's not a type of video that I plan to do more of, but at the same time, I loved doing it nevertheless. Pinkan Pokemon. Pinkan Island is a natural wildlife preserve in the Orange Islands in the anime. Its name comes from a special fruit that grows on the island, which turns Pokemon a pinkish color. Its pink Pokemon are highly sought after by poachers, so people are not allowed on this island, and anyone caught on it is immediately confronted by Officer Jenny. Research scientists and other rangers also live on the island to study the rare Pokemon, but the location is deliberately kept a secret to avoid outside interference. As such, its Pokemon tend to be hostile towards humans. Pinkan Island also has natural defenses and is surrounded by giant whirlpools. Its sheer cliffs are the only way onto the island. There are just a handful of buildings on the island that the people who help Officer Jenny stay in. Now, the special fruit is called a Pinkan Berry, or a Pinkan Fruit. It is a type of berry that is only found on Pinkan Island of the Orange Islands, and they were first seen in the episode In the Pink. The berry has special properties as it will turn any Pokemon that eats it pink. If a Pokemon eats the berries often enough, the color change will be permanent. However, if it is only eaten a few times, the Pokemon will soon revert to its normal coloration. When Ash's Pikachu ate the berries, just the tip of his tail and his cheeks turned pink rather than his whole body. Now, looking at all this, I kind of figured that this might be related to the flamingo, who through eating the shrimp that it does and also preening its feathers, it gets its color. We also get metabolism in bugs. For example, when you look at a dragonfly, all of their color typically comes from their metabolism. So when they die, all their vibrant color goes away. And we kind of see a lot of these Pokemon are able to groom themselves in similar enough ways, or they are bug Pokemon that are turning this pink. Though Rhyhorn is the only outlier, the only real thing that could be is that maybe it just likes the berries, maybe it's smashing them, who knows. Now, another solution though was brought to my attention by Nick345 during the live stream in which I was researching a good chunk of my information, which is as follows. Carotenoids found in things such as carrots, spinach, kale, and sweet potatoes, lycopene in tomatoes, turmeric, and even beets can all change the color of whoever eats it through excess consumption. What we can then assume here is that the anime just wanted to speed up this process, and we have a similar natural chemical in effect, which is dope. I love the strawberry pink Pokemon. It's one of my favorite, colorations. That's why Shiny Pachirisu, it is Pachirisu. Yeah. That's why Shiny Pachirisu is one of my favorite shinies out there, and it's fun science just sped up within Pokemon. What is there to hate about it? I love it. Pokemon 2000 Adventure. This one's a trip. Pokemon the Movie 2000 Adventure, also known as Pokemon 2000 Adventure, was a browser-based first-person adventure game developed by Cyberworld International Corporation and distributed by Warner Brothers. The game uses a special internet browser, which then connects to a server to download portions of the game at a time. The game was developed to promote the North American release of Pokemon the Movie 2000, The Power of One, as Nintendo had licensed Warner Bros. To create promotional materials for the film. However, the game proved much more successful than expected, with over 1 million downloads in the first month. Out of concern that the game might overshadow other Pokemon games or create brand confusion, Nintendo sent a cease and desist letter to Cyberworld, and all download links of the game were pulled. That's wild to me. That is insane to me. I get their idea behind it, but to do that is shocking. Well, some people might not say it's not shocking, considering past Nintendo, but it is what it is, I guess. And I will say, in 2023, the game's files resurfaced online, and it was restored to a playable state through fan efforts. So let's break this game down. After obtaining a license from Nintendo to create promotional material for Pokemon the Movie 2000, Warner Brothers approached developer Cyberworld to develop a game to promote the film with a budget of $2 million. In preparation for the game, Warner Brothers provided Cyberworld with a VHS tape of the film and sent a Pokemon expert to provide additional information. Initially, only one member of the development team had any knowledge of Pokemon. The available teams of Pokemon were designed to all have a way to surpass each obstacle, with some redundancies should Team Rocket steal a Pokemon that the player needed. The Ditto that appears after 3 attempts acts as an additional failsafe to ensure the player can still progress. The game uses Cyberworld's Cuborg technology, Cuborbs being 3D grid-based movements, or environments rather, that can be explored in first person using a special internet browser. So think of like the 3D worlds where you click and then your character moves forward. You click and your character moves forward, but you're not actually moving your character directly. Really old at this point, I realize, and it makes me feel like dust. While most of Cyberworld's games would use a shared browser, Pokemon 2000 Adventure would have its own separate browser with a Pokemon-themed interface. And to close this section out, I'm just going to share with you some of the fun facts or trivia that is part of this. This game misspells Articuno as Articunos and Electabuzz as Electrabuzz. Some of the advanced trivia questions refer to real-life promotions, one about the city of Topeka, Kansas, being renamed to Topekachu in 1998, and one about the Pokemon Patrol, a fleet of Pikachu-themed 1998 Volkswagen Beetles. One of the intermediate trivia questions asks how many different Pokemon are there in total, including Missigno and Mew. This is a rare instance of Missigno being acknowledged in official Pokemon media. Now, the accepted answer for this question is 152, though this omits counting any Pokemon from Generation 2, despite 2 such Pokemon, Lugia and Slowking, being featured prominently in the film. And finally, Rapidash is the only evolved Pokemon that does not grant more points than its previous form when clearing obstacles. A wild lost relic that people absolutely do not remember, I guarantee. But wow! Abyssal Ruins Great King. Again, I've talked about this in my Great War Timeline video, but I'll at least go through it a little bit briefly here. The Abyssal Ruins talks about a king who brought people together, who brought harmony to everyone. The Great King Harmonious. And through that, it ties in a lot of other characters to the Abyssal Ruins, especially as Ghetsis and N share harmony within their names, and the Great King was said to have brought the people together to be a person that ended the war. And a lot of the symbolism actually sends us in our eyes to look at AZ, the big man himself. So, again, if you want to learn a lot about the Great War Timeline video, there's a number of entries here that are answered because of that. HMs are licenses. I'm honestly, I'm gonna say straight out, I'm not a fan of this one. They are clearly discs as seen in the games or manga, and it's not like they can't be used in battle when you have them. You just can't use them in the real world, assuming you don't have this skill. And there is artwork, the only artwork I've ever found, where it makes the HMs look like a headband helmet thing, similar to the experience share in some capacity, meaning that it kind of instills the power through their mind directly, which makes me a little uncomfortable. But even in the manga, we kind of see that it's a disc that's randomly found. So, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the HMs being licenses, but in another timeline, sure, why not? That could be cool, especially since they're basically approved or disproved for you to be able to use them by the gym leaders. Water from Pokemon is undrinkable. Some, possibly all, water-type Pokemon produce potable water. And the reason for this is because in the 9th Pokemon movie, Ash and his companions are thirsty. They come across Elizabeth, who's using a water-type Pokemon, Poliwhirl, to produce water, which her Psychic-type Pokemon, Meditite or Medicham, are making levitate into spherical balls. Max, Ash's companion, drinks directly from one of these spheres and suffers no ill health as a consequence. Additionally, Elizabeth, who is familiar with water-type Pokemon, and Ash, who spent multiple years with a water-type trainer, don't offer any discouragement or warnings to him before he drinks the water. In other words, through just general context clues, we can assume to some capacity that maybe certain Pokemon or water-type Pokemon have drinkable water. Maybe because it's an amphibian, maybe it has cleaner water somehow. Meanwhile, I wouldn't want to drink water from, say, certain fish Pokemon, especially if they reside primarily in the ocean, considering seawater or saltwater. Maybe through some level of pasteurization or just cleaning up of the water that it could be used. Alternatively, it could also be type of move dependent. For example, brine, being based off of brining, salt water, may not be something you want to drink unless you want to die. But if you drink something like water gun, I don't know, sure, you're probably gonna get shot by a bunch of water and it's gonna hurt, of course, which assumedly would be just regular old fresh water, assuming there's no extra biological material excreted through said move of water gun, then it might be fine. So again, it could be Pokemon move or location dependence, making it so that maybe Pokemon do have drinkable water if you really need to do so. We're getting into the 4th layer of the iceberg here. There's still plenty of things that you might be aware of, especially if you've been a fan of Pokemon for a long time, but let's get started. Misty paid full price for her bike. Okay, it's always the first one that always seems the most ridiculous or the most interesting with these icebergs for some reason. When looking at this, though, we do know that the Cerulean City bikes cost upwards of 1 million Pokédollars, and Misty is depicted only as a gym leader in the anime, but is loaded in the manga, though she doesn't have a bike like that in the manga. it's really a toss-up as, you know, maybe she worked for all this money. She properly put it away and saved up for it to pay 1,000,000 credits towards this bike, which Ash then promptly absolutely decimated, with Pikachu for that matter. So, who knows? I mean, it would make sense why she got so mad. She saved up for it, and her sisters are often very favored over her, considering that all she got were hand-me-downs from them throughout her life, while they were pretty much the pretty princesses that also got to run the entertainment of the anime. So, who knows? Maybe she did pay full price for her bike. Phoebe is from the Alola region. Phoebe is the second member of the Hoenn Elite Four to be faced at the Pokemon League. Phoebe trains at Mount Pyre, where she says she developed the ability to commune with ghost-type Pokemon, which is a volcano. During the post-game of Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Phoebe also goes there to visit her grandmother, upon whom Phoebe says the player made a lasting impression. I assume that might actually be the grandmother that we stayed, like, in rest with on our journey up the mountain. I'm not sure, but there are no real extra details found anywhere, as her appearances in every form of media are very short-lived. So, being very Hawaiian-themed in her design, don't know why I went southern, she's maybe from Alola, or really loves Alolan culture. It doesn't really go further than her clothing to help us figure these ideas out. Though, to have fun with it, her hair bears what I believe to be red hibiscus in her official art. In the language of flowers, a red hibiscus typically symbolizes love, passion, and intense emotions, making it a popular choice for romantic gestures. It could be a non-romantic sense, but a showing of love for life or ghost Pokemon, or even in relation to her grandmother for that case, for that just very innocent love and connection that she has with all of these things. Silver's mother is Ariana. If you don't know who Ariana is, that is a Team Rocket executive who, by all means, considering how these two look and being some of the few red-haired Pokemon trainers throughout Pokemon, you could also say that they might be related to Mars and Diamond and Pearl to some capacity somehow. Ultimately, though, when we look at Silver's mother potentially being Ariana, we also look at the idea that this Team Rocket executive did appear originally in the games as an unnamed executive, and is, again, the only one with red hair. I talk about this a lot deeper in my full explanation and history of Team Rocket and Giovanni, but ultimately it is just that, and Giovanni is known to be the father of Silver. The question is then, who is the mother? And considering Giovanni's want for power, then sure, it may have just been another Team Rocket executive because Giovanni was not originally the leader of Team Rocket. It was his mother, who then passed it on to him. So there's a chance that he had the time to flourish some level of romance with somebody else, though I don't know how, true and genuine that may have been. Guzma was abused by his father. I found someone else who actually talked about this theory and explained it very beautifully. User Esseris on the Pokemon Bulba Guardian forum states, "In fairness, I think it's certain that there is friction between Guzma and his parents, so it's relatively easy to misread certain cues as suggesting that the situation is worse than it actually is. In Guzma's old house, we see a duffel bag full of broken and bent, quote-unquote, golf clubs. His father also says this: it's good for kids to experience their own journeys, but running away without even word to your parents is another thing entirely. I tried to set that boy of mine straight, but when I did, I was the one who got beat." This is a line that includes the phrase "got beat black and blue" in Japanese, but as stated from research into the subject, it's been led to believe that the phrase is actually being used idiomatically as an idiom. Some people read this as the dad saying that he intended to use corporal punishment in order to discipline Guzma for running away, until Guzma turned the tables and quote-unquote beat his father. And then the more people connected that to the golf clubs in the corner of the room, inferring that Guzma's dad had tried to use one of those clubs to beat him with. Another thing that some people have taken up as evidence is Guzma's talk about smashing things in frustration, and with him saying, "Guzma, what is wrong with you?" to himself after losing. The idea being that Guzma is mirroring the abuse that he went through by smashing things and scolding himself in the same way that his father would have. But to this person, and honestly to myself, this may be reading too deeply into things. The golf clubs in the corner could be damaged because Guzma has always had a short fuse that caused him to smash things whenever he got frustrated, which is something that I'd say we're led to believe happened quite a bit in his youth because his strength was never recognized in a way that satisfied him. This is explicitly why he gravitates towards Lusamine, because she offers him that praise. Looking at his room, there are a bunch of bronze trophies and 1 silver, which his mom says he won for competing in battle competitions, but there are no gold trophies. He's always been in 2nd or 3rd place. As for what his dad said, it's like, this is Pokemon. I get that Pokemon can have dark moments, just look at N's backstory, but what seems more likely? That Guzma's dad tried to teach him a lesson through abuse with a weapon that could have very easily killed a young Guzma or left him severely wounded, to say nothing of the moral implications of Guzma reconnecting with his parents in the post-game if his father did do something so outrageously horrific, or that they had a dispute and attempted to settle it in the way that virtually every single dispute in the universe is resolved, through a Pokemon battle, which Guzma then won and probably latched onto as validation for his own strength. A "see, I proved you wrong, old man" type thing. Compounding this, the dad's additional post-game dialogue was then added into the Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, being, "That boy of mine came waltzing back home after all this time. So I challenged him to a battle, and I got beat bad. Kids really grow up fast, don't they? And that boy of mine grew up to be huge." This firmly puts the phrase "got beat" into the context of losing a Pokemon battle. But really, this is kind of a recurring problem with the Alola games, as you can see with a similar misconception that Lusamine's neglectful behavior was subtly influenced by Nihilego for years and years ever since Moan's disappearance, even though that's not really how Nihilego works, and even though the game portrays Lusamine as having never seen Nihilego until our first trip into Aether Paradise. In all fairness though, I don't want to put all the blame on the fans for their misunderstandings, because perhaps the existence of the misreadings is a sign that the story wasn't clear enough in communicating its ideas. And I agree with all of those statements. I mean, it's hard not to come through with these misconceptions, especially if, or since rather, it is such a long game, or any of these games are very long. When you're looking at 40 hours of content, sometimes you need things restated, especially if some of this information is only stated once, and you may misremember it at that point. People state all the time that Lusamine was emotionally, well, and more than that, abusive to Lily and Gladion. My gosh, I can never remember both of their names in one. But she was only such a horrible person as the toxins or influence of Nihilego started getting into her more and more, which occurred over time before the events of the game. And that's just the same misconceptions or type of misconceptions that happen throughout Pokemon. People misremember things. It's normal. But at least we have this clarification here, a mystery solved, and we can move on. All trainers in Mt.Silver were champions. In the games, Mt.Silver is off limits to all but the most skilled of trainers. After the player has received all 16 badges of Johto and Kanto, Professor Oak will give the player permission to travel here. The route to the area, Kanto Route 28, is rough, though no HMs are explicitly required to reach the Pokemon Center just outside of the entrance of Mt.Silver Cave. Inside, however, the cave is dark, requiring Flash to see in the first room. Many high-level Pokemon reside in the cave, as well as rare Pokemon not found elsewhere in the Johto region, like Larvitar and Mischievous. So, theoretically, yes, this would be the case, but other than the people in the Poke Center, there's nobody in Mt.Silver except right at the very top. So, sure, if you did find anybody here, they would have been champions. But they're not here. Moving on. Kyurem eats humans. This is something that is only found in the Pokédex entry before Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, and is otherwise something that is much more a rumor than it is actual fact, especially as there was the original belief that Kyurem came from space, when it has been said very directly that Kyurem did not, and is in fact just 1/3 of the original Dragon of Unova. Again, Rumors within the Pokédex are all over the place. It's super fun looking into like the myths of the Pokemon world, and one day I will just go ahead and make a video about the Pokédex and how it lies to you. Haena Desert Man from Ike Town. After becoming champion, a mysterious man appears in the desert, apparently suffering from amnesia. If the player shows him a Solrock or Lunatone, he will regain his memories and mention that he first encountered the Pokemon shown to him 30 years earlier, and that the star pulses it bestowed upon him have been passed down to a group of wonderful men. This is likely a reference to the old guys and the O-powers they give to the player in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, as the same sound effect used when obtaining an O-power is used when Solrock and Lunatone causes the man to regain his memories. Now, I assume that they got the original title of this theory wrong, and that they meant to say that this person would be from Mauville, considering that's the origin place of the people with O-powers, and that would be within Hoenn, where Solrock and Lunatone originated. The O-powers old men have been suspected to be aliens. They've been suspected to just be telekinetic, psi people. It's all over the place, but because of these O-power people, it has been able, or they have been able to be used to help actually determine the timeline of the Pokemon world and which games come before and after. So those are important to keep in mind for when I do cover the Pokemon timeline video one day. Lanturn can destroy the universe. So Lanturn can basically create a light that is so incredibly powerful that it can be seen for multiple kilometers under the water. Now, even if you travel with light a single kilometer through the water, it is drastically dimmed, to the point where eventually, before you even get to the point in which Lanturn can cast its light from and be seen on the surface still, you wouldn't see any light at all. And it's more than just distance. It has to do with particulate matter and everything else that could be a part of all of that. So the fact that Lanturn can create such an immense light multiple kilometers deep into the ocean, where it sits typically at or near the floor as it hunts for other Pokemon. It's not on the floor because it is a football fish, anglerfish Pokemon. Then that power, the sheer amount of light, is created through heat or energy, and is an incredibly dense amount of energy within an incredibly pressurized environment, which is the perfect recipe, or at least part of the perfect recipe, that theoretically could create a black hole. Lots of energy in an incredibly small amount of space that is incredibly pressurized. Boom. Black hole, universe is destroyed, thank you Lanturn. And that is theoretically a possibility every single time that it flashes its light, and because it does it all the time, and its lore, that it's just a coin flip at this point. It's a coin flip. When is it gonna happen? When is the universe gonna be destroyed? Ash is physically strong. He has so many feats within the world of Pokemon. Having the confidence to punch Mewtwo, having taken many hits from Pokemon, holding up a Larvitar, holding up a Cosmoem, which is basically a super dense star. I'm not even going to go through them all. Instead, I'm just in the description going to include the list of things that someone else compiled, because it is absolutely absurd, and honestly, props to this person for making the list. Unknown blob Pokemon. I'm assuming that this references the really weird, very scared blob Pokemon that vaguely resembles Ditto, but it has a face, amongst any other unknown Pokemon by all means, because I can't find anything else. This was in the manga, and that's really it. It could have just been a gag. It could have been something that, oh, we don't really have all these Pokemon created, so we can make something vague, and then have something made from it in the future. So why don't we do that? When it comes to unknown Pokemon, not only do we have the original dragon, we have this blob thing, we have the thing that the Pokédoll is referenced from, or even the Pokemon that we see in the Pokemon gyms for that matter. There's a lot of unknown, unnamed Pokemon that exist in the world and may never be named or properly fleshed out. I mean, we've had the statue and the Pokédoll for all these years, but we don't have a clear-cut Pokemon that they are based on, just general speculation and lines that we can draw. Erica was a Ghost-type gym leader. Found on Reddit, once again, you can find this one fairly easily, we find that there's some evidence stacked towards this. Erica was originally a Ghost-type specialist as you dig through some of the original data that she has. Her original sprite, her yukata, is worn right over left, which in Japanese tradition is for dressing corpses. Her updated yellow sprite removes this detail, where she is wearing her yukata left over right as a living person would. Her closed eyes and a blank expression then take on a whole new meaning, and her levitating Pokeball suggests supernatural powers. In her earliest concept art, Erica was depicted as the 5th gym leader. On the concept map of Kanto, Lavender Town was designed as the 5th city. It is possible that she may have been the original Lavender Town gym leader. In recent, or not recent I guess at this point, the Gen 1 Beta League, Agatha was not a Ghost-type specialist in her 2 original scrapped parties. This may have been due to Erica being the original Ghost-type specialist. One party, Agatha had Tangela, Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon, levels being 55 and 52. Agatha, in her other team, had a 55 Tauros, 56 Flareon, and a 59 Jolteon, which honestly what's really interesting about that is if we did have those, that would have brought about a whole new slew of speculations on how Agatha could have been related to the Kimono Girls instead of Erica. So these little changes that have occurred in the past vastly mess with what we theorize, well, throughout all these years. And you know what? Yeah, Erica was originally meant to be a Ghost-type gym leader in concept, but didn't make it much further than just the concept, and was changed thereafter. Clan leaders wear their creation dragon orbs. This one is something that takes a little bit of time to look at the designs of both Adamant and Irida within Pokemon Legends Arceus. We can see on their designs that they both have a choker of sorts that has a gem in each of them. Adamant's is very clearly a diamond of sorts, matching to the look of the Adamant Orb, alongside the names of course. Meanwhile, Irida doesn't really look like any version of the Lustrous Orb that we are aware of. It really doesn't look like anything except for Amber. We can look at her little wristband floaty things, but ultimately even those have one orb each. It doesn't seem to actually be pearls of any kind to me. It would be cool considering that once again, Adamant is adamant, and Irida's Japanese name leans into pearls better as Kai is derived from Shinjugai, from pearl oyster. Simple and fun, but otherwise hard to really prove 100%, and I'd be a big fan if this was actually true. Fuji in the movie and Lavender Town are the same. Mr. Fuji, Professor Fuji. And this is something that is kind of true, I mean, for the most part. And the only difference, and if you don't know the story, I should say it here actually, is that Fuji is known to have been there with Blaine during the creation of Mewtwo within the games, having even been the person to write the diaries that we find within the Burned Mansion. Now, he changed his life, and is basically just a person who cares for other Pokemon. Though, within the movie, we have a younger, much different looking Fuji, and the biggest difference, other than just how he looks, is the fact that Fuji had a daughter. And in the process of creating Mewtwo, not only did they create Charmander 2, Bulbasaur 2, and Squirtle 2, literally just that, but also the daughter, a second version of her. And when she passed, he was distraught once more, realizing that it was not stable. That Mewtwo is the only one they were able to keep alive properly. Actually, I think the Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander do come back in some capacity in different versions of the, anime or the movies, but that's a whole different ball game. It's the fact that a human life was lost, and Fuji somehow survived the explosion and went on with his life, and that could just be another reason why he changed how he was as a person, instead of being the cruel, dark human being he was that basically tortured Mewtwo. he became someone who is supposed to be kind to Pokemon and repent for those sins. And I know I've talked about this many times. Heck, I even think I talked about it in the previous video of this iceberg, but it's something that, I don't know, I've always loved the Blaine and Fuji stories, really. They're some of my favorites within the Pokemon world. Crystal Pokemon are terrestrial. Crystal Pokemon, otherwise known as neutral Pokemon, straight from Japanese, are a type of Pokemon in the Pokemon trading card game. They are considered by fans to be the E-Series equivalent of the Shining Pokemon, previously introduced in the later Neo expansions, Neo Revelation and Neo Destiny. These would otherwise just be shiny Pokemon in general if you didn't know what shining Pokemon were, because I didn't. However, the Pokemon featured in each of the cards are not alternately colored. Introduced in Aquapolis, Crystal Pokemon are identified by being colorless, but focus on 3 particular types of energy to use in its attacks. All Crystal Pokemon have the Pokebody Crystal type, in which the type of the Pokemon changes from colorless to one of 3 specified types if the corresponding energy card is placed on it for 1 turn. These types are also emphasized on the card design. For example, Celebi's Pokebody and attacks focus on Grass, Water, and Psychic. The colors green, blue, and purple are highlighted in the card background. Crystal Pokemon are also not necessarily basic Pokemon and are counted as regular Pokemon. While they weren't bound by 1 per deck ruling like Shining Pokemon, they still featured several energy for each attack and were quite costly for the effects they provided. In Japan, these cards were released 3 at a time over the course of the last 3 e-card expansions, but with the hurried release of the English sets and their condensation, Skyridge featured 6. In both languages, all Crystal Pokemon are secret cards. Crystal Pokemon were retired at the end of the e-card series. In the end, sure, they just kind of seem to function differently overall, but similarly enough, and even the TCG now has introduced the terrestrial Pokemon, or the terrestrial phenomenon, which still functions differently than the old Crystal Pokemon. It is fair to say that the Crystal Pokemon may have crawled so that way terrestrialization could run. Sun and Moon School Ghost. This one's a bit of a long one. In Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, when the player speaks to a youngster on Big Wave Beach, he will tell them about a rumor about the trainer's school. After speaking to the youngster and completing Hala's Grand Trial, if the player visits the trainer's school at night, the music will be noticeably different and the area will be empty, except for a single preschooler and a Drifloon next to the sign in front of the building. The principal's door is locked. When talking to the girl, she will tell the player to solve the 7 mysteries. However, she only offers the player 6 mysteries to solve, saying that she doesn't know what the 7th mystery is. The player can trigger each mystery by choosing to investigate it by talking to the preschooler near the sign at the entrance, then meeting the trigger condition. The player cannot trigger an event unless they have chosen to investigate it, with each of the initial 6 having explanations. 1. At night, near burning place, scary lights show up and wander. Burning. Someone burning and crying. You hear girl's voice. Youth athlete Deidre is using the incinerator to burn love letters she wrote to a crush who is now in a relationship with someone else. She decided to burn them late at night so nobody would notice. When the player notices her doing this, she challenges them to a battle. 2. At night, you hear strange sound. Slimy, getting close. Footsteps of Lord Slimy. If you're found, Lord Slimy swallow you. You're gone. Once you reach 3rd floor, the player hears Lord Slimy's footsteps coming up the stairs and has to hide. You can't go down the stairs because that's where the footsteps are coming from. They hide in a locker, but you are found by the janitor's grandson and the cleaning grimer, Grimo. Grimo has to clean the lockers, so has the janitor's grandson help him out with that, since Grimo cannot open the lockers himself. Grimo works late at night to clean more than his rival, Grimer Grimy. So you're starting to see that there's explanations for all of these, but let's continue anyway. At night, teacher's lounge, 2nd floor. You hear broadcasts from beyond grave. You're done for if you hear it. You can't leave. It's over for you. As the player walks towards the door, they hear a broadcast over the PA system, telling them they cannot get out. When they approach the door, a man with a slowpoke appears. The man tells the player that the speaker was broken, so he had to fix it. However, his slowpoke fell asleep in front of the door and he couldn't get out. 4. Night stairs, cursed. You go up and up, but still same place. You can't go down either. Circle, circle, can't go back. Once you reach the second floor, the player feels a cold breeze. Even if you go up or down the stairs, you remain on the second floor. If the player goes to the west side of the floor, they notice a bulletin board. One piece of paper has black stains on it, which indicates the lower left, lower right, then upper right corner. If the player steps on these sparkles on the floor in these corners of second floor in that order, they can use the stairs again. When proceeding to the first floor, they are immediately attacked by a wild Ghastly. Likely, it created an illusion that trapped you there. 5. It appears on the shelf, third floor. Keep reading and scary thing happens. If you finish reading it, someone take you away. You're probably noticing there's a lot of broken dialogue here, and that gets explained later. But the diary tells a story of someone who bought a seemingly haunted house. They would hear a constant scratching sound, which the player then hears. The owner would also see something moving in the house. After finishing the diary, the lights suddenly go out, and the player is attacked by a wild Drifloon. After completing the battle with Drifloon, the player reads the rest of the diary and discovers that it is in fact a horror fiction novel written in diary format. 6. At night, classroom, second floor, you hear laughter. Ghosts are taking a class too. Everyone says so. When the player enters the classroom, there is a teacher and students in the room. Many of the students tell the player to join them and be their friend. If the player interacts with the teacher, she is revealed to actually be a hypno, creating an illusion, who then flees and disappears. The students, also part of Hypno's illusion, also vanish. After the player solves all 6 of the offered mysteries, the preschooler tells the player that she moved from a foreign country and didn't speak Alola's language very well. She was sad that her friends were scared by the mysteries, but now that the player has solved them, her friends don't need to be scared, giving the player the wise glasses as a thanks. Suddenly, the school security officer calls out to them, questioning why they are at the school so late at night. The player talks to the security officer, but the girl has vanished. The officer tells the player that they were alone when he called out to them. After this, the school will return to normal at night, playing the regular music and without the preschooler and her Drifloon ever appearing again. So, with the understanding that all of those other stories were solvable, and judging on the idea that the preschooler apparently moved from a foreign country and has a Drifloon, there is a small chance that the real story is that the child was unfortunately dragged from a different country to Alola. In addition, there are few regions within Pokemon that you need to learn the language of so far due to language barriers. For example, Brendan and May are from Johto as you play them in Hoenn. Caleb and Serena in X and Y are from an unknown region. Elio and Serene from Sun and Moon are from Kanto. Moon from the Adventures manga of Sun and Moon is from Sinnoh, potentially being a sister or relative to Platinum, otherwise known as Dawn. And thank you to Muse Art World for pointing that one out. And Flori and Juliana from Scarlet and Violet are likely from Galar thanks to their mom saying Kappa. So because of these instances, we can assume the child is not from Kanto, which, considering Kanto shares similar dialects with Johto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh, those can all be marked off, especially as they are very far from Alola. The only other options we would then have are Galar and Paldea, which are closer unless we get another region that could be closer in the future and could share those similar dialects. So yeah, Drifloon took a child from another region, spirited them away, and that child may not have actually survived the flight. Or, yeah, I know what, I'm not going to go into any other details there because that could get really dark really fast, and I'd rather move on. Zora trailer researcher was Ingo. Thank you to Pink Sneasel Girl on Reddit for the following. So yeah, I recently saw a few videos discussing this. Might link a few if people are interested, but what really cements this theory in my head is one overlooked detail: the voice actor. Now, I know Legends Arceus doesn't have voice acting, but a Pokemon Masters EX does, and Ingo's voice actor sounds very similar to the guy from the Zora trailer. Now, I myself was guilty of giving Ingo a dour, kind of monotone voice in my head because of his general looks and sour expression, but in Masters, it turns out he and his brother have very upbeat and cheerful personalities and voices, just like the guy in the trailer. Another little detail I don't see mentioned by others is that the guy wears black. which is seen when he wipes the camera. Now, what does make this interesting is that the Pearl Clan did find Ingo and is the one to introduce him to us. Then we get additional supporting information from ECNav MC2. 1. The person seems to be somewhat confused at when and where he is, but can use the item, or rather, record. 2. He seems to know a bit about Pokemon, as well as being pretty much completely fearless about approaching wild Pokemon, which is a stark contrast from most of the people in Hisui at this point. I will add in the fact that Zora were arguably some of the most feared Pokemon at that time if we exclude our legendary and mythical Pokemon. So anyone approaching the Zora is incredibly odd unless you are a person that already knows them to be safer than a rumor has ever stated, and he does state that this is a weird new Pokemon. And finally, as EC Nav states, Bone Chill Wastes, where you find Zora and Zoroark, is not very far from the Pearl Clan settlement, so it's not unlikely that the man in the trailer was found by the Pearl Clan after the Zoroark backed off. So, yeah, I can get behind this idea that Ingo was the researcher, plain and simple. I never thought anything of it and had assumed that this person had flat out died, but hey, they may have been saved, and it turns out they're just Ingo. Item Ball. An item, otherwise known as tool in Japanese, is an object in the Pokemon games which the player can pick up, keep in their bag, and use in some manner. They have various uses, including healing, powering up, helping one to catch Pokemon, or accessing new areas. In Pokemon Coliseum, they are an item chest. I guess the mystery here is why they're based on Pokeballs, but in all reality, they garner mystery, and since Pokeballs are already associated with a positive thing, then it entices a new player to investigate and then find out that you then get free items, furthering the positivity or the positive connotation behind the imagery. Until Pokemon flips the script and it turns out that Pokemon can mimic these items found on the overworld in the form of Voltorb or any other Pokemon. It's game design Appleton. It just says Appleton. I assume that this is because its back is an apple pie, and both children and Lechonk, amongst other Pokemon, may eat the layers on its back as a treat or food source in general. The question is, does it harm Appleton? We assume not, because children aren't attacked by it, and it seems to be a friendly Pokemon to us overall. Honestly, there are many Pokemon that are eaten by people canonically, shown both through the anime and the games, so this isn't very surprising, and we can move on. Episode 244 Legendary Pokemon is Mega Gyarados. This one's a classic one that everyone probably knows at this point still, and it's basically just a shadow of a legendary Pokemon that was seen and just vaguely resembles Mega Gyarados all these years later when Mega Gyarados was shown in the games. So, sure, this isn't, again, the first time that old designs from the anime or maybe the TCG or anything else may have inspired modern-day Pokemon. And in fact, we're going to move on very quickly to Toxtricity in Sun and Moon. G-Max Toxtricity makes a brief appearance in Pokemon Sun and Moon in a poster at Game Freak office in Haena City. We can see the color scheme and even the two coil-like tail. That one is very short and sweet, though it does make you wonder what else is out there that are teasers for future games. Looker's Croagunk. So, as of Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, he did have a Croagunk, but by the time that we get into Kalos, he has an Esper. It is said that at one point, Looker did have a Pokemon that did pass away, and he does have a picture of what seems to be himself and a Croagunk sitting on one of his desks. This could just be simply brought together to show that, hey, yeah, Pokemon do die, and his passed away in the line of battle, in the line of work, unfortunately being his Croagunk that he really did love, and again, now he just simply has an Esper. This is less about it being the Croagunk and more about like the fact that, hey, what Pokemon was it the one that passed away? In which case it does lead us to the Croagunk. Shard Origins. A shard is a color fragment of an ancient tool that was introduced in Generation 3. While they have no use on their own, several NPCs apparently have some use for them and will trade other items or services for these objects. The underground shards have the same palette and proportions as several plates, with the red shard matching the flame plate, blue shard for Splash, green for Meadow, and yellow for Zap. This has caused some to believe that the ancient item mentioned in the bag description is in fact one of the plates. plates. Even when Arceus lost the plates while protecting the Earth from a meteor that, was going to destroy everything, those plates that it had did not shatter. They seem to be unbreakable by all means, and I'm a big fan of the idea that Arceus could have created other plates to send down to the chosen Pokemon or people to bear them, otherwise in lore noted as the rightful bearers of the plates, and there is the chance that those may have broken. But if we're strictly speaking of the true plates of Arceus, they are definitely not from these shards, unfortunately. Gardevoir's Fairy Wind removal. Prior to the release of Pokemon X and Y, a screenshot of Gardevoir using Fairy Wind was showcased. However, Gardevoir, or any of its evolutionary relatives for that matter, are unable to learn the move in the final game. So moves being changed isn't a big deal, but if we want to be technical about it and actually find a solution or answer, Gardevoir is the human-like and amorphous egg group Pokemon. It resides within those egg groups. There are no humanoids that learn it naturally, and Galarian Weezing is the only amorphous Pokemon that does learn it naturally. So we could just say that through mechanics, they didn't want the move spreading further into other move pools, or that simply it's just something that is not within their genetics. That's about as definitive as we can get, though I will at least note that Snom can learn it through breeding, so go Snom. Ghetsis' true name. We mentioned this one earlier, but Ghetsis' true name is Jesus Harmonia Gropius. When we look at N, his full name is Natural Harmonia Gropius. Natural Harmony Gropius. The closest we get to Gropius in real life is simply Walter Gropius, who was a German architect, but otherwise holds no real connection whatsoever. I was able to get some assistance through the help of Fanica Fox, who was also there for the stream, who noted that it is likely or definitely more European or London-like at a glance when we look at N's castle, which I can't think of many other strong connections from there myself, other than considering Galar, which it's kind of representative of all of it, but it is more representative of older architecture considering the castles. What makes it more interesting, though, is that Harmonia was the name of the Great King that we read about within the Abyssal Ruins. This would make Ghetsis related through bloodline to the king, but not a direct descendant, as N is said to have the ability to speak to Pokemon as the Great King could do, despite Ghetsis randomly finding or seeking out, somehow, N, who was living in the wild. Again, if you want all of this explained a lot better, go watch my Great War Timeline video. I'm just keeping it very, very basic here. Gardevoir's bosses. The closest I can get to solving this, because it's very vague, is that Gardevoir is a guardian angel, kind of a princess, while Gallade is a loyal knight, potentially a prince of sorts. Very Zelda and Link vibes. So theoretically speaking, if these are knights and princesses, even though either form can be male or female, then who is the queen or king? Who are the bosses of these Pokemon? Beings of extreme loyalty, emotion, and the development of those concepts, it does open up some doors for us to hope that there are potential related Pokemon that we will find, or maybe even some additional lore leading to specific royalty within the world of Pokemon. But unfortunately, it doesn't leave us with much room for speculation here. Rose Battle Theme Chanting. I'm going to let the music start now so that we can get an idea of what we're dealing with. We have chanting in the beginning, as well as some chorus later on, and eventually we have some Latin. Full-on Latin language within the world of Pokemon. And it seems that the words are Rosa Cedo Credo, which translates to I believe in the rose, or I believe in Rose. And this is amazing. I never realized this way back then. And when we look at Latin, though, it was originally spoken by small groups of people living along the lower Tiber River. Latin spread with the increase of Roman political power, first through Italy, and then throughout most of Western and Southern Europe and the Central and Western Mediterranean coastal regions of Africa. As such, considering the old-style architecture and ties to the royal lineage shown through the manga, and how ancient and evil Eternimax was said to be, it's very fitting to hear Latin within Rose's theme, especially if this is assumed those chanting voices are to be the royal family cheering him on rather than the modern people, as he was aiming to work with Swordsbirds and Shieldbirds to pretend and make them seem like they were the true heroes and cover up the past and the truth. So, really cool music, really cool stuff going on for Rose. It's just really unfortunate that Sword and Shield overall just had some glaring problems. And I think after this video, I think I'm going to break down every single Pokemon generation to figure out which one really was the best generation. Soak moved inspired by Pikachu versus Onix. Soak changes the typing of the opponents affected by this move into a water-type Pokemon. We see both in the manga and the anime that there is a moment, or at least within the anime, Onix does get soaked by a bunch of water sprinklers, whereas in the manga, Pikachu just flat out shocks it and that Onix hits the ground. In both situations, Pikachu does use a electric type move. It's able to affect the Onix and it bites the dust. At least in the anime, again, it is hit by the sprinkler system, which, if we want to go with the whole idea of, hey, that made it an actual effective move and knocked down the Onix, maybe it was fully soaked in water, and thus we can create the soak move, even though, I mean, Pikachu didn't do it directly. I mean, it wasn't using the move itself. It just used the environment to its advantage, which makes sense for a rock or ground type Pokemon to soak in all of that water and then be affected. So, sure, why not? Fun theory. Rainbow Rocket Mewtwo is evil. So, Rainbow Rocket I've talked about before, but when we look at them and Giovanni, he actually succeeded in his plans. He defeats Red, he then forgets about him, he takes over the Kanto region, probably takes over Johto, the world, then jumps into the funny little multi-dimensional device that he's using, and goes into Alola to start the Rainbow Rocket adventure that we then have, or the Rainbow Rocket episode. When we fight him, we get through all of his Pokemon, and his last one is a Mewtwo, which he then Mega Evolves. Mega Evolution is supposed to be through the bond that you have with your Pokemon. And considering how evil Giovanni is, it can be surmised that maybe Mewtwo is then evil as well from the timeline that Giovanni succeeded in. Maybe in that case, Giovanni didn't have to deal with Mewtwo escaping from the lab, but instead was able to actually get Mewtwo right off the bat. A full success in recreating Mew into the most powerful Pokemon that you cannot find in nature, which would have been the one big key thing other than capturing all three legendary birds that Giovanni needed in order to succeed with his domination plans. Tailless Galarian Ponyta. This was simply a graphical error that happened during the multi-hour live stream that would tease new and old Pokemon that would be appearing within the Galar region through footage of the Glimwood Tangle. Nothing crazy to go on. Again, graphical error. Aura is infinite energy. Infinite energy or infinity energy is the bioenergy contained with every Pokemon that gives them their life energy. Pokemon such as Lucario, Medicham, and others are able to sense aura. Now, we also know that Pokemon have, again, that bioenergy within them. So, with that, and the idea that every creature does have an aura, then we can start to get into the idea of how people may even have aura, or since they do within this world, and are able to harness it depending on, well, what type of trainer they are. We see this with Ash, for example, especially when we look at him and his Lucario, or him with his Greninja, which then ties into a whole other ball game that I'm not going to get into here, which is the idea then that either A, because of aura being infinite energy, all humans and Pokemon do come from a common ancestor, which is pretty much canonical within the Pokemon world thanks to the Kind of Love library, but also that since that can be harnessed, that Ash has the ability to use infinite energy. It gets really complicated, and there's a whole other video that I've kind of been planning in the background but haven't done yet because it's a whole big deep analysis of something that another person has brought to me, and I don't want to reveal too much because it'll be fun when I finally do go through it. But let's move on. Lavender Tower has no bodies. Okay, this sounds like it could be fun, though in Pokemon Let's Go games, they make the graves a little bit more realistic. Originally, every gravestone seemed to connect directly to the ground floor, which means that either the floors are thicker than they seem, or there wouldn't be any bodies at all. Then now, because of the Let's Go games, each grave now has a block, for lack of better terms, directly under the gravestone that it is then attached to. This is where the Pokemon would be encased. Not that every Pokemon would fit inside of those, as they are probably just big enough to fit 2 people inside of it, but cremation is a thing, and if we want to have fun with it, like I said earlier, we can always get into the idea that because Gastly is said to have a sickly sweet smell despite its toxic gases, and since Gastly does spawn the most in areas such as graveyards, that deceased corpses, which emit a just noxious fume that has been described as having that same sweet but sickly smell, could be producing Gastly as they decompose, leaving nothing behind except for, of course, maybe bones and the Gastly that would then be there. Brandon is Paul's father. Brandon, Jindai, is the Frontier Brain and Chief of the Battle Frontier's Battle Pyramid. He is the only character in the games to have the trainer class Pyramid King and is found in Hoenn originally. Any trainer arriving at the top of the Battle Pyramid just after Brandon must battle against him for their status of the Pyramid's Conqueror. Brandon appreciates the grand life of the explorer. He recalls the passion, danger, and desperation of his death-defying and life-affirming adventures. When defeated in battle, he'll praise the grandeur of the match and hand over the brave symbol. In Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Brandon is revealed to have worked with Kimi Mauville to produce various television programs detailing the search for the mythical Pokemon Volcanion in the Kalos, Sinnoh, and Johto regions. He has a Regirock, Registeel, and Regice, or the legendary birds, and his Japanese name can mean Age of the Gods or Ancient Time, which relates back to, well, a lot of these Pokemon, but will relate further as we look at Paul or Shinji, which translates to Pearl. Well, time, Pearl, Diamond, Pearl. Let's continue. Paul is a major reoccurring character in the Pokemon the series. He is a Pokemon trainer from Veilstone who was first seen at the end of 2 Degrees of Separation, though his full introduction was in When Pokemon Worlds Collide. He is Ash's main rival in the Pokemon the series Diamond and Pearl. Supporting details of all of this theory that they are related is not only just through their appearance being similar, but also Paul's obsession with beating Brandon, Paul's brother literally being named Reggie, and then they both also use a Ninjask in their final fights against Ash. Honestly, all of these qualities are close enough that if they were brought into the modern day through any Pokemon game, we would assume that they are 1000% related to each other, as we have seen within the Legends games and even Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, with characters that may not look like their parents, but follow similar traits, personalities, or even ace Pokemon. And as such, I'm going to subscribe to the theory. It's a little too perfect to ignore that these two are related. Gold Sudowoodo Machine. All That Glitters Is Not Golden is the 173rd episode of Pokemon the series Ruby and Sapphire, in which the group decides to stop for lunch as they make their way to the Battle Pyramid. While May and Ash volunteer to collect water, they encounter a golden Sudowoodo, and basically an experiment was conducted on a regular Sudowoodo to help it overcome its fear of water, thus turning it gold, though it does not like being in this state. Now, Sudowoodo simply hates water, it's petrified wood, which is moreover the fact that it is actually a rock. When Sudowoodo gets wet, if it gets too wet, it damages it, it hurts it, so on and so forth. Though, if it were encased in gold, such as Gold Leaf, for example, it would actually then be resistant to water. It's fairly plain and simple, as I doubt this kid fully transformed Sudowoodo through some form of Full Metal Alchemist level alchemy, and if he was able to turn petrified wood into gold, we'd have bigger problems on our hands. So, likely whatever machine or process he used on Sudowoodo, whatever experiment it was just covering it in Gold Leaf. Ore region is Arizona. Ore is the setting of Generation 3 side game series where Pokemon Colosseum and XD Galactic Darkness take place. In other games, Pokemon obtained in Ore are listed as being met in a distant land. I just wanted to mention this one. There's not really much of a mystery to it, but it's the fact that this is now another place that takes place in, like, the United States. Arizona, New York, Hawaii, but they're entire regions. So, yeah, sure, maybe every single state in the United States will eventually get turned into its own region, which I wouldn't put it past Pokemon, especially when, you know, you could take entire cities from other countries and do that. I mean, it is said that a lot of states, or moreover, there are like 4 or 5 regions within the United States, that their customs are so different that they could be their own countries rather than being one nation. Or a singular country, whatever you want to say. My brain's getting fried. Fungus inspired the Pokeball. Fungus, having the Pokeball on top of its head, is just a Pokemon that is often seen or said to have been rumored within the Pokemon world to have inspired the Pokeball itself. Though, I often go with the opposite idea being true, which is the idea that Fungus, knowing that people or Pokemon may be attracted to Pokeballs in some capacity, may have adapted with humanity in an effort to counter and cull humanity, being our predators, as it will entice us and it will then eat us. Advanced Generation Episode 101, Shaking Island Battle Barboach vs. Whiscash, was intended to be the 101st episode of Pokemon this series, Ruby and Sapphire. It was set to air in Japan on November 4th, 2004, but the episode was skipped due to strong earthquakes in Niigata Prefecture nearly a week before the first airing of Advanced Generation 100. It has never aired in Japan or in any other country, and is thus not considered canonical. Likely as a result of this episode's cancellation, the move Earthquake, as well as similar moves such as Fissure and Magnitude, has not been used in the animated series in any later episode. In the episode after winning the Mine Badge at the Moss Deep Gym, Ash, in this episode, was supposed to head for the final gym in Sootopolis City. Along the way, he and his friends stop by on Jojo Island and are caught in an earthquake caused by a group of Whiscash. They then meet a Pokemon trainer named Shota and his Barboach, and decide to help him in getting rid of the Whiscash. This was the only Pokemon in the series Ruby and Sapphire episode to be banned in every country. The second episode of the entire animated series to be banned in every country. The first being, of course, the episode in which Pikachu attacks the Porygon. And the first regular episode of the entire animated series to never be aired at all. 2 later episodes were also canceled just before airing because of an earthquake. Because this episode never aired, Ash is never shown learning the location of the final Hoenn League gym on screen. Not the first time this has occurred, nor will it be the last, whether this be in this anime or another one, out of respect for those affected by disasters. I've seen this happen with an anime such as Fire Force after a fire-based attack on human lives, so yes, this is very much completely understandable, though they censored it in Fire Force since, you know, the whole show is about fire. Time for the one that you clicked on the thumbnail for. Allistor is a Yamask. Allistor, or Onion, is the gym leader of Stow-on-Side's gym, known officially as Stow-on-Side Stadium. He specializes in Ghost-type Pokemon, he gives the Ghost Badge to trainers who defeat him, and in Pokemon Sword, B takes his place as Stow-on-Side's gym leader instead. This mysterious trainer became the gym leader of Stow-on-Side's gym at a very young age. He is known to be very shy and fearful around people, which is why he wears a mask. The mask serves as a way of confronting his fears and insecurities. He never removes his mask in public. He also keeps about 100 masks with the same design needed in the event his mask falls off. He is rarely seen around in public, preferring to spend most this time alone in ruins and cemeteries. From his mask, if we look at the concept art, smoke can come out of the eyes and mouth, and his uniform number 291, which can be read in Japanese as Gorawase, which could be for Nikui, meaning hateful, which Onion would actually likely be related back to not just onions in general, but rather Oni, or demon for that matter. So I assume this theory was primarily created before we started seeing a lot more images and video of Allistor without his mask in the animations. there is only one image in the games proper that has him without his mask, which is his trainer card, which some people may have expected, since that is a probably more private photo or specialized photo, that it may not be real or something else along those lines, especially since we know that Yamask, at least in the other versions, aren't the mask, but simply carry the mask of what they were, what they looked like when they were alive. When we look at his teams, we do find throughout all media, he has had Galarian Yamask, Mimikyu, Gengar with G-Maxes, Cursola, Duskmar, Chandelure, Poltergeist, Runerigas, and a Gourgeist in Masters EX, a Sinister in the anime, sorry, Sinistee, thank you, autocorrect, the Ghastly line in Twilight Wings, and finally Dreepy and Dracloak only in the manga. The most common of them all, if we break all those down, actually being Gengar, Corsola, and Galarian Yamask. Now, of course, again, when we look at Yamask, or the original one, it is said each of them carries a mask that used to be its face when it was human. So, of course, having not seen an actual face and getting a new regional Yamask, people would go nuts, imagining Allistor as an actual ghost or a Yamask, or even that he died at one point but was brought back. This is because he claims to have an ability to see deceased ghost-type Pokemon, which was after an accident at the age of 4, making this the second time that we have confirmation that ghost-type Pokemon can die. Considering his attachment to the Gengar line, we have a couple of plausibilities with them and other Pokemon. One is that his soul was removed from his body, and someone from the Gengar line, most likely Hunter, helped put it back into his body. Alternatively, since he does have a Yamask on his team, he may have touched one of the many original runes that makes up Runerigas, which would have then cursed Allistor to have a similar fate as those Pokemon. So, while clearly Allistor is very human, we can't support that the idea that due to his past experiences, his soul has been changed by these Pokemon, thus giving him his sixth sense. Though there is one more theory that could line up with all of this, and that is the fact that his mask may actually be made up from Galarian Corsola or Cursola, for that matter, since their visual similarities. All you have to really do is accidentally bump one of these Pokemon with your foot, and they will essentially petrify you, which may have happened to Allistor. I doubt he'd be the type to kill a Pokemon, make them into masks, but at the same time, when Corsola, or Galarian Corsola, evolves into Cursola, it does break off parts of its body as it expands upward, meaning that maybe he didn't have to kill one, and they're all over the place, so all he has to do is pick up, these pieces, and then bop them onto his face after a little bit of work. Either way, whether he's doing that or just designing his masks after them, or just the general scary concept of a ghost, it is interesting to consider the idea that after such an incident, he would have the Pokemon on his team and even model his mask after it. Just a small reminder of his past that set him onto the path that he is currently on. Originally, I didn't care for this theory at all, but it was fun to make into a thumbnail, and it allowed us to explore other theories surrounding him and expand on his character. Lava Dome Pokemon. Clearly this resembles or represents Heatran, and I was ready to skip this one, but then Reddit user Theosapien suggests the following. Heatran. Even Pokemon Legends Arceus has not much in its lore, stating that its molten steel body holds many unsolved mysteries, but what we know of it is that it was born on the magma beneath Mount Coronet, and that Heatran guards the magma stone. Without it, the Lava Dome Pokemon would rampage and cause its volcanic layer to erupt. It's Fire Steel, which references molten steel, especially the molten iron in Earth's outer core, plus its forehead vaguely resembles an anvil used in blacksmithing. As far as we know, in the main Poke-Earth, there are 4 Heatran in the following locations: Stark Mountain, Reversal Mountain, Scorched Slab, and the Max Lair. It all makes me think of a certain deity, the Japanese fire god Kagusuchi. Heatran may be subtly inspired by that deity. Kagusuchi is also the patron deity of blacksmiths. Notably, his birth burned his mother Izanami, killing her in the process. This made Izanagi mad with grief to the point that he used his sword to behead and cut Kagusuchi's body into 8 pieces. Those pieces became 8 volcanoes. Volcanoes. Now there is a reason why there are multiple Heatran on the world. By the way, Izanami and Izagami are the people who are the inspirations likely behind Spear Pillar, considering their own backgrounds, and will relate back to Dialga and Palkia for that matter. That's just what I wanted to throw in. Now, Theosapien continues. Also, this means that there are 4 more remaining Heatran in Poke Earth. The theory is, what if all the Heatran that you battle are the living pieces of a long-forgotten cataclysmic heat god Pokemon that once lurked within the molten iron oceans of the outer core? One that could have threatened to turn our planet into a literal inferno of molten metal, but eventually it split into 8 living pieces, which are the Heatran we know and love. Thoughts? And to give my own thoughts, I'm a big fan of this. I already know that when we look at volcanoes within the world of Pokemon, we do have, creatures that are inspired by them. Moreover, Typhlosion is inspired by, a god that basically ran the volcanoes and also had a little, not porcupine, echidna, as a pet that slumbered under the mountain, thus giving us potential inspirations for Typhlosion. So, when you're telling me that any legendary, for that matter, or even a mythical, if we ever get something like that, can come together to create something even bigger and more legendary because it otherwise posed as a natural threat and the other gods had to knock it down, I'm in. I mean, we see something similar to Zygarde in the fact that it breaks itself apart and only comes together when there is a true threat to the entire ecosystem of the world, or when we look at Pokemon such as Hoopa and its unbound form. It's not uncommon to, see a Pokemon that had to be restrained when we look at type Null. So, this whole Heatran theory seems like a really fun one, and I'd like to see if it ever comes to be anything in the future. We are finally onto Tier 5. We're at the point where the majority of these mysteries and theories should be concepts we really have forgotten or dig up into the franchise through very small hints. Starting with Commander Commodore is from Mahogany Town. From Reddit user Epos96. Commander and Benny, who is the ninja who is related back to Wally, are most likely from Mahogany Town of Johto. Here is why. Also, I realized I called Benny a ninja. I mean, he is, but by all means, he's the person that gives you mochi and is famous for his mochi in the town. Either way, we know they're from Johto since Commodore speaks in Kansai Johto dialect when he loses his composure. We know Commodore and Benny come from a village that was destroyed by Pokemon. Lake of Rage is near Mahogany Town, famous for a disaster caused by rampaging Gyarados. And Mahogany Town is a former ninja village. Towers and Team Rocket HQ are part ninja infrastructure. And again, Benny is a ninja. An extra bit of information or fun piece is that Professor Rowan, a descendant of Commodore, has a sweet tooth in Pokemon Platinum. He is looking potentially for Rage Candy Bars, a familiar family treat. Now, I will add to this idea that originally the Lake of Rage was supposed to have a village right there, right where it is, but was later removed before the official release of the games. In that case, we may even be able to suggest that before the Lake of Rage was there was truly a small village that was then destroyed during the Edo period, or we're going to get into the fact that it's not the Edo period technically, which Arceus takes place. And following this, within the game, we do know that Commodore is afraid of Gyarados. Some speculate that he has more Galarian-based armor, but let's hone in on that time frame to help us because we do have a Galarian wheezing referenced on the building. The Meiji Revolution occurs at the tail end of the Edo period. Actually, it happens immediately after it in 1868. This was a pivotal period in Japanese history, marking the end of the Tokugawa shogunate and the restoration of imperial rule in 1868, ushering in a rapid era of modernization and westernization. This would explain paintings, new technology, why Professor Laventon is from another land, has a different dialect, different ideals from the people of Hisui, and isn't afraid of Pokemon while also staying within the time frame of when Galarian wheezing would have been created, which was during the Industrial Revolution of Europe and apparently happened during this time, and Japan had English coal factories. It goes way deeper than I expected it to, or probably needed it to, but it all shows the different connections between regions, where answers came from, where they went, and their history between their own regions and each other, and how that is reflected or rather mirrors the real world. That Pokemon timeline video is going to have to be made in the future. This is getting ridiculous because of all the industrialization and the concepts that lead into each other. Officer Jenny's Growlithe is named RK9. This one's silly, but it is a little bit fun. Basically, Officer Jenny at one point told her Growlithe, Arcanine, use Flamethrower, thus mixing up the two forms, assumedly. But it is proposed by people that the Growlithe, because the episode is also called The Case of the K9 Caper, that the Growlithe was just a pun name, as the franchise is apt to do, giving Growlithe the name RK9. Cute, simple, moving on. Magcargo Dex Entry meant to be shiny. I didn't pick up on this one immediately, and it took Thomas P3864 on Reddit for their explanation for me to even understand it. So according to Magcargo's Pokédex entry, its body temperature is 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit. However, despite this, it is the color red. This conflicts with the black body emission spectrum for Magcargo at its body temperature. In order for the Pokédex given information for the temperature to be correct, the measure must have been taken of a Magcargo which appeared a light blue color. This is not the peak emission level, since that would result in the sun being green, but what Wolfram Alpha gives as the perceived color is the color Magcargo should be based on for the temperature. Basically, that's saying that the Magcargo should be blue, however, its shiny is magenta and has never appeared as any color other than its standard in the anime. However, shinies change from generation to generation, especially between generations 2, 3, and 5, and 6, and Magcargo's generation 2 shiny underwent a change. And as you can see, this shiny Magcargo is blue, which it may not quite be as light in color as one would expect, but a rich blue color cannot be created with black body radiation. Therefore, this person proposes that the figures given by the Pokédex were taken from a Gen 2 shiny for it to be as closest to this 18,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature as possible for it to be correct. If that was too much mumbo jumbo for you to understand, basically it's saying, hey, you can't be the colors that you are if you're 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit. You have to be blue, which means the Pokédex is wrong unless you are the shiny blue Magcargo, which appears only in one generation. Done. Arceus' body is a hand. I'm only bringing this up because I love the idea that Arceus is just a master hand constantly flipping us off the entire time in battle. Machoke's skin is being ripped. Machoke is said to be able to constantly improve its muscles. They're expanding, they're getting stronger every single time, and due to the rapid increase of power and muscle growth, its skin is actually unable to keep up with said growth, and all those red marks that you see all over its body are actually tears in its skin. Gross, dark, not uncommon for Pokemon if it were to be true, but that's really it. Pokemon uses Lamarckism instead of Darwinism. Bear with me on this one. Lamarckism is a theory of evolution based on the principle that physical changes in organisms during their lifetime, such as greater development of an organ or a part through increased use, could be transmitted to their offspring. This is an abandoned idea that is disproven and suggests that, hey, let's say nobody in my family could squat, and I decided to squat all the time, really build up those glutes. Then through constant use, my immediate next child should have amazing squatting power because I squatted so much and used those muscles. If you wanted another example, imagine somebody who just drank alcohol all the time, and somehow your liver, your kidneys, whatever, did not die. Well, my child should then be immune to alcohol in terms of its toxic properties when they are born. This is something that would not occur through multiple generations. Instead, it would be immediate. Artists, this would mean that your children would immediately have calloused fingers or whatever it is on on your finger right there when you're doing so much art, or whatever else. It is, again, the idea that because you used a part of your body, an organ, or whatever else so much, that that trait is immediately passed on rather than a generational pass on that we actually see because Lamarckism is wrong. So, I mean, yeah, it makes sense that this would be the case for Pokemon such as the Machop line, as we just talked about, because they're constantly moving and improving their muscles so that when they evolve, they just get bigger muscles or more arms because that's what they use the most. Another example is that we have Munchlax. It eats so much and eats everything only for it to then evolve into a creature that can eat anything, because Munchlax can't eat anything and everything without getting sick, but Snorlax can. And as such, it also gets a larger stomach to properly contain it all. Though this is not the case for every single Pokemon, it may as well be Lamarckism within their world. Odd Keystone in Twinleaf Town. So this wouldn't be a big deal if the Keystone itself wasn't such a rare occurrence. We find it attached to Spiritomb already, or in the Legends Arceus quest, Route 208, which is near the Lost Tower, home of the Ghost-type Pokemon, but then we also find it amongst trees, hidden away, and only obtainable after surfing to it in this hidden location in Twinleaf Town. This honestly only leads to one possible conclusion, and that would be that the people of Twinleaf Town likely bury their Pokemon or family within this forest. After all, Spiritomb is a collection of spirits. Even if they are seen as evil or negative, they are commonly found near burial spots. Fallarbor Town is meant to be a snow theme. I'll go ahead and let that music play now while I talk about it. It does have some of the same musical motifs that we can hear a little of in our other wintry songs, whether that be in the games or in other songs in real life. The interesting part about it, though, is that sure, it's supposed to be a snow town theme, if it is, but it's not for winter snow, like actual water crystals. It's soot raining down, considering the location of Fallarbor Town. Soot, snow, which gives it a fun little twist. Mewtwo's skeleton machine. Basically, in one of the movies, Mewtwo has a creepy organic cloning machine. The robotic hands that are shown in one scene that grab Ash are articulated like human arm bones, and the clones of Pokemon when born get pushed out from their tubes with a nasty squishing noise. And through looking at the images, they definitely look a lot more bone-like rather than robotic, which makes it all that more creepier, and we can see where this conclusion is drawn from. In the remakes, it looks far more robotic, but at the same time, we get a lot of organic inspirations, such as a Nautilus shape for one of the machines with cloned Pokemon in it. Though I will say that the arms in the original are more jointed and connected in ways that a robotic arm would be, rather than an organic human bone. Though that does not take away from the fact that they straight up look, through coloration and texture, like bones, as opposed to the metallic look that they get in the remakes, bringing out speculation that maybe Mewtwo somehow turned all of the bones of the scientists he killed into weapons within the facility. Even if there was that big explosion, the bones may not break down completely in the fire, and as such, they are charred here. It's just that coloration threw it off, and we knew that it was supposed to be some sort of organic facility creating clones, so it all kind of meshed together in our heads, like putting two puzzle pieces that aren't supposed to be connected and slamming them down anyway. Guzzlord is a mutated Pokemon. So, considering we know that Guzzlord is from an alternate timeline, primarily being from the ruined world of Alola, we could start thinking of the possibilities that were here. Now, in that alternate timeline, the Guzzlord appeared after the lands had been properly taken over by a corporation that the residents of Alola allowed to take residence there. The corporation continued to grow, they littered, they just dumped waste, and overall just completely ruined the environment, which kick-started Guzzlord's entry into that alternate world. And with doing so, and the lands being destroyed, nature being destroyed, the Tapus got all their energy from nature itself, and without nature, no energy and no power for the Tapus. As such, they abandoned the lands, and nobody was there to stop Guzzlord. In addition, Z-moves were no longer usable in that timeline if you were from that timeline, because you are no longer charged with that natural power, which was really Ultra Necrozma's power, but has otherwise kind of just been nurtured into the lands itself. That one gets complicated. Now, it doesn't say that Guzzlord was from a different timeline or universe from the one that was destroyed. It just says that Guzzlord kind of just appeared. So, some people have posited the idea that maybe Guzzlord was a regular Pokemon, say like a Munchlax or Snorlax, which are found in those lands who already eat a lot, and were genetically mutated through whatever means it may have been, nuclear waste or otherwise, and became Guzzlord, this all-consumer that will destroy entire planets. It's an interesting theory that, I mean, we don't even know where Guzzlord actually comes from. We just know that, I don't know, at one point in the anime, there are 2 Guzzlord, a regular and a shiny. But otherwise, we've never seen their home planet, and I don't even know if they really have one with the way that they act. I wouldn't be surprised if they just, you know, are creatures that suddenly exist, or are born, and like Celesteela, immediately leave. Maybe they're a sort of creature that parasites on a planet, has children, and then they dip to go to a different planet altogether, or entire other universes, as we see in the anime. Shaman's thank you cry. This one only works if you consider arigato gozaimasu, which was pointed out thanks to Muse Art World and Fenneca Fox during my live stream again, as it even matches the right number of syllables. I'm gonna go ahead and let that play now. Arigato gozaimasu. This, of course, is all just a reference to Shaman and the Sky Warrior movie, and if you haven't seen it, you can check out my synopsis, reaction, or review from it from when I watched it for the first time in October. Maybe one day I'll just watch all the Pokemon movies and then rank them all. That just sounds like fun. Old Chateau Poisoning. I'm going to give you the fast and dirty theory and then give you what another Reddit user came up with, which will also encompass a later theory while tying together what could be the truth behind the chateau. So the poisoning is the idea that because of Rotom releasing gas through some sort of motor or maybe another person or Pokemon's actions, the family is being poisoned. The butler, being the man we see, tried to save the little girl that resides there, but ultimately their fate was sealed. Now they roam the chateau, trapped within it forever. There are many other theories revolving around the idea that maybe other ghost Pokemon, such as Haunter or even Ghastly, due to their gaseous and poisonous forms, may have killed them all instead, or maybe a family member was the murderer all along. Though it is through a theory brought on by Reddit user Delta Char that we get an amazing analysis that ropes in a number of other theories to tie up loose ends. Ever since its introduction in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, the Old Chateau has been one of the most mysterious locations in all of the Pokemon games. The existence of real ghosts, as well as the mysterious Pokemon Rotom encountered in that game as if it were a legendary Pokemon, left players wanting more. Pokemon Platinum expanded the lore of Rotom and the Chateau, but a clear picture was never painted, until recently that is, with new information provided in the Pokemon Generations episode, as well as Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I believe I have the information to solve every mystery of the Old Chateau. Let's start with the most prominent case, Rotom. In Pokemon Platinum, a new area is accessible to the player in Team Galactic's Eterna City building. Inside the building, along with Rotom's appliances, are 2 journals. One is a research journal written by Team Galactic's scientist Charon, and the other is a child's journal, clearly written by someone else. Notice how in the research journal, Charon is discovering Rotom's motor inhabiting abilities for the first time, whereas the child watched Rotom possess a lawnmower. Remarkably, Rotom has the ability to enter and merge with special motors. At that instant, a Pokemon startlingly emerged from the lawnmower's motor. Now, it's commonly theorized that the little girl in the Old Chateau is the author of the notebook and that Rotom killed her, but that never made much sense, as the notebook ends with Rotom and the child reuniting, not the child's death. However, there is one character that is given a similar backstory to the child in the journal. A young boy, socially awkward with cold, uncaring parents, has no friends, but finds solace in toys and machines he can tinker with. This boy is Cyrus, leader of Team Galactic. If Cyrus is indeed the author of the journal, it can explain Cyrus's motivations for hating human spirit. In the journal, Rotom flees after being startled by the child. Those feelings of pain and loss at having your best friend, your only friend, abandon you could drive a child like Cyrus to believe that feeling emotions and the existence of human spirit is wrong. What good are these emotions if they only serve to hurt him? This can also explain why the Rotom room is in the Galactic Eterna base, the only time Rotom's appliances are connected to an evil team. Charon is given the journal by Cyrus himself to assist in his research. Cyrus gave up Rotom to Charon. I realized that we would remain friends throughout our lives. This is the last line of the journal. I don't know about you, but to me it has an ominous tone to it. Cyrus, whom, after being abandoned by Rotom, resolved to rid himself of emotion, finds his friend again and realizes that if things remain the way they were, he may lose his resolve. So he decides to give up Rotom, his only attachment to positive emotions, and allow Charon to experiment on it. But I've been speculating up until this point. Yes, Rotom has connections to Team Galactic, but Cyrus specifically? This question went unanswered for a decade, until Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. In episode Rainbow Rocket, we meet an alternate universe version of Cyrus who has completed his mission of creating a world devoid of spirit. This Cyrus, while at peace with himself, speaks to not the player, but Rotom Dex directly, reassuring him, I see. You need not worry, Rotom. I will not do anything to this world. I believe I shall return to the perfect world I created. He reassures Rotom specifically, talking to him in a friendly manner he showed no other character in any of his other appearances. It's as if he is remembering something fondly, something he now remembers with fondness as he is at peace with his spiritless world, free of the pain and hurt he felt as a child. Now, I know most of you are going to be asking the question, what does any of this have to do with the old chateau? Well, Rotom isn't from the old chateau. He escaped to there. As I stated earlier, we know that Rotom was once at the Galactic Eterna building, the subject of Charon's research and experiments. Since he is no longer there, he must have escaped. Where would a wild Pokemon like Rotom go while on the run? To a habitat Rotom would feel comfortable in, a nearby location filled with ghost-type Pokemon. The old chateau is right outside Eterna building, or rather Eterna City, located in the Eterna Forest. Rotom is hiding out in the old chateau, hiding from the humans that betrayed it and abandoned it. You can tell Rotom is hiding from the Generations episode. Cheryl is attacked by the little girl only when she reads the paper referencing Rotom. The girl doesn't want any human finding Rotom there. The old man in the old chateau is a perplexing mystery. Is he the butler? Is he the little girl's father? Is he the grandfather? Nothing about him is quite clear. In the Pokemon Generations episode, you are sent mixed signals. He answers the door, shows the guests around like a butler would. However, he sits at the head of the table during dinner, something only the head of a household would do. The butler does not sit at the table at all, let alone the head of the table. Also, there is a large portrait of the old man on the wall in the entrance, again where the head of the household's portrait would be. Definitely, again, not a butler's portrait. You can tell these are the same men by their similar hair and their identical clothing, the only difference being the mustache sizes. So, is he a butler or the head of the household? Well, I think the answer is neither. Later in the episode, when he begins to scare Cheryl and her Chansey, the old man changes form, first taking the form of a lightning storm, chasing the trainer, but then, right before they disappear, he takes on a different form, the form of a giant haunter. There are only 2 other instances of giant haunters in the entire Pokemon franchise. The illusion of a haunter in Fear Factor Phony, where the illusion is conjured by ghost-type Pokemon, a regular haunter among them, and Black Fog, the giant ancient haunter from the Electric Tail of Pikachu manga. In both cases, Haunter was in one way or another the true form of the giant haunter. So why would the giant haunter in the old chateau be any different? Maybe Haunter is the old man's true form. This explains the inconsistency of his role as butler or head of the household. But why that form? My guess is where the little girl, the butler is the caretaker of the home, and the house's head is the strong, reliable figure you look up to. This haunter is taking care of this little girl whose spirit is trapped in the old chateau, taking the traditional roles of caretaker and strong, reliable father figure that a little girl might need while growing up. And this falls in line with my theory about Rotom in the old chateau. They're all hiding out and being taken care of. This may expose the role of the old chateau as a whole. It's a ghost sanctuary. Ghost and ghost-type Pokemon who are trapped there or have nowhere else to go hide out in the old chateau, and they care for and are cared for by one another. It's actually a pretty wholesome story or theory about a dead child and the creepy house she resides in. The only question from here then left is, who is this little girl and what is she doing here? If Rotom didn't kill her, if the old man is just a haunter and didn't die with her, then what happened? Well, this is where I think I take the biggest leap, but it's not without evidence. To find out what happened to the little girl, we look at what isn't there. If Rotom and the old man aren't original residents, then where did the little girl's family go? The house is abandoned with no trace of anyone else in the home, save for some wild Pokemon that like to inhabit abandoned buildings. Well, the spirit of a child, an abandoned house with no sign of family, this is starting to sound like another location in the Pokemon world, the Strange House in Unova. In the Strange House, a young girl fell victim to Darkrai's nightmares, with her family failing to revive her in time with Cresselia's lunar wing. The girl's spirit wanders the home and the Marvelous Bridge, while the surviving family flees the house, abandoning their doomed daughter. Now, that is something that I bring up in the previous iceberg, and this is a new take on it from this person. An abandoned house, the lonely spirit of a ghost girl, Darkrai, the story fits here too. Darkrai is known to prey on children in the Sinnoh region. Sailor Eldritch's son falls prey to Darkrai's spell before being rescued by the player, and even the player themselves ends up trapped in one of the Darkrai's nightmares if they enter the abandoned harbor inn. It isn't too much of a stretch to say that this little girl could have also been one of Darkrai's victims. Places where Darkrai's nightmares claim victims always end up abandoned by the survivors. The harbor inn and the Strange House were abandoned for that reason. Maybe the old chateau was abandoned for that reason as well. Summary / the TLDR. Darkrai's nightmares killed the little girl in the old chateau, caused the family to abandon it. A giant haunter takes the form of an old man, taking up the roles of both caretaker and mentor role model for the little girl's spirit that is trapped in the house, establishing the old chateau as a kind of ghost sanctuary. Rotom was Cyrus's Pokemon, who betrayed Rotom and sent him to be experimented on by Charon. Rotom escaped Team Galactic custody and hid in the old chateau in the nearby woods to be protected by the hunter taking care of the place and the little girl who lives there. And now I am no longer reading from their notes. This is as tight-knit as it could possibly get, with some incredibly strong reasoning all in all. The only thing that gets a little bit weird is whenever we introduce Darkrai, because of Darkrai's way of attacking people, but then also being said to not actually be trying to attack people, but also still trapping people in endless voids of nightmares anyway, and causing, well, these people or these ghosts to be trapped in our world anyway as actual ghosts, not ghost-type Pokemon. So, yeah, I mean, sure, their biggest leap may have been towards the end, but anything revolving around Darkrai kind of seems to be that case, and this is about as close as we're gonna get to the old chateau and the story around it, well, to an answer as we're gonna get to it. So, I'm a big fan of this, and I'm personally gonna take this in as my own mental canon. Light and Dark Pokemon. This was all part of the TCG, to light and to darkness. Pokemon read the mysterious light in Pokemon shrouded in darkness. What is their connection to Team Rocket? The mystery deepens, and the adventure never ends. Neo Destiny is the name given to the fourth and final main expansion of the Neo series of the Pokemon trading card game. In Japan, it was released as Darkness and to Light, the fourth and final expansion in the Pokemon card game Neo era. It is based on Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, featuring Generation 2 Pokemon. Neo Destiny introduced Light Pokemon, a type of Pokemon. Light Pokemon cards have a white and gold artwork window, evolution box, and Pokedex box. Light Pokemon have higher HPs compared to those of normal Pokemon, and attacks that often aid other Pokemon in play, likely due to the carrying nature of the trainer. Because of that last chunk of information, I personally suspect that this can all be explained and related to, very simply, to what we see in modern day through the Pokemon Go games, which also took inspiration from Shadow Pokemon and bring both of these two different concepts together. Essentially, Shadow and Purified Pokemon. Light and Dark Pokemon crawled, so that way Shadow and Purified Pokemon can run, as we see them in the Colosseum or XD Gale of Darkness games, and eventually within Pokemon Go, as in the modern Pokemon Go, Purified Pokemon have different benefits, have a whitish glow to them, and may have higher HP. Inevitable Battle Chatelaine Faller. The only bits that I could get from this is that we have the Battle Chatelaines, which are 4 individuals that are found within the games and have legendary trio Pokemon. All of them do. They just don't have the box art legendaries, which are banned from being in the Battle Chateau. So when we look at them, I can't find any particular information that tells us anything about them. The only thing that we can even go from here is that we have the word Faller in here, which I talked about in the previous portion of the iceberg, but Fallers have nothing to do with these guys. So I just wanted to bring this up for the idea that maybe there's something I could not find and someone else vaguely knows, and I can only hope someone finds something on it. Malamar time travel. In the anime, there were 3 very evil Malamar that are very different from the rest of the Malamar that we ever see in the anime or games for that matter. These 3 Malamar are even more intelligent than your typical ones are, revealing to also be incredibly evil. They had a number of plans throughout the anime, but when we reach the final episode that they are in, Malamar are boasting about the true nature of their final project, which is where they will use 6 devices and alter the world's environment drastically in order to create a world that is best suited for them, although such a world would almost certainly not benefit any other parties. Basically, they're gonna be not an invasive species, but instead they're going to turn the entire world maybe into some sort of ocean, some sort of beach, some sort of place in which only the Malamar will thrive and everyone else will be weakened. Maybe at that point then, it would even cause, entire other regions to collapse. Legendary Pokemon that derive their power from nature would fall to Malamar at that point, creating cataclysmic events everywhere. So yeah, this is kind of a big deal. Now, once they are defeated, they escape back to the future, saying how they will return one day. And they haven't. It's been multiple years and they haven't returned, they haven't come back, and I mean, considering the fact that they went to the future and they're hyper intelligent, there is always the actual chance that they will return one day, which is why this mystery is here. Also, why don't they just, if they could just travel back in time, why don't they just travel further back in time before this happened and just destroy everything? They're not that smart. Celesteela inspired Claydoll. Comparing the two, we don't really initially find a lot of similarities. Sure, they have similar stances. Both of them basically don't have legs, as they are stubby at best, and not really something that they can walk on. Then they come to the same points at their head and fire beams from their arms, because yes, despite the 360 view of all their eyes, they actually fire beams from their arms. In addition, Shiny Claydoll does have the same color yellow for its eyes as Celesteela has within its body, which is really a minor detail. But then we start to consider where we find both of them. They are only in the Pokemon Moon games. Baltoy, more specifically, only found in Ultra Moon, and both are found in the Haena Desert, or Haena Desert. And it is within Ultra Moon that we get for the first time the following Dex entry for Claydoll. The ancient people who made it apparently modeled it after something that descended from the sky. It fires beams from both arms. Past entries have stated that they may have been made by an ancient civilization, modeling them after clay dolls. But this is the first time that we get told that they are modeled after a thing from the sky. And considering that Alola, based on Hawaii, basically has little to no readily available or usable clay, at least in the past, then this would make Baltoy and Claydoll that much more special, as they model it after something that descended or went into, ascended, the heavens. The only question we have now is, did this happen before Baltoy and Claydoll were created elsewhere? Which, strange phenomenon that occurs simultaneously throughout the world with similar details despite people not interacting with each other, is something we see in real life all the time, and is something that is incredibly fun. This, though, will create a new question while putting an end to this mystery. Cool Trainer Nick is a cheater. This one gets into the weeds real bad. I'm not gonna lie to you, it gets real nasty. So, Cool Trainer Nick is the bug catching contest trainer. Now, when you enter the bug catching contest, for some reason, Nick is almost always the winner. And unofficial guides by other people have prompted the idea that, hey, if Cool Trainer Nick is found in this spot that you should go to, just end the contest. Just don't even bother, because he will win. not might, he will win. In which case, you're not just battling the percentile chance and actually trying to be a good trainer in a battle, you are also battling for the good spots in the Pokemon contest grass against him. Magnezone Transmissions. Its Dex entry states, as it zooms through the sky, this Pokemon seems to be receiving signals of unknown origin while transmitting signals of unknown purpose. This goes back to the idea that it looks very much like a UFO, and people tried to experiment on it further, trying to combine multiple Magnezone but couldn't. The interesting part that this leads into is the whole idea of radio signals throughout all of Pokemon. Again, I recommend my video looking at Toby's Fakeamon because I talk about radio transmissions and all of that in that video in detail, but this may actually link it to Dusknoir, who receives signals of sorts as it then takes orders to bring people to the afterlife. Are they related? Are they not? It's a possibility. Radio signals are all over the place in Pokemon and have some strong connections, but it's unknown. Mega Volt is the strongest electric move. Basically, this is in reference to 10 million volt Thunderbolt, or Thunderbolt, the Z move used by Pikachu, and only usable in the games if you have a Pikachu with Ash's cap and the correct Z crystal. Now, when this happens, it is an incredibly powerful Pokemon move by all means, and I originally believed that there were other Pokemon that could reach this voltage without using the move, but nope, there isn't. And by all means, considering the sheer amount of power that's shown in the climatic moments against Tapu Koko and this move being used, amongst other situations when it was used, yeah, sure, it's the strongest electric move. Moving on. Wait at the usual place. In the Lumio station, there are 2 billboards. Go to the one in the back, press A while standing behind it, and you will be told that something is written on the back of the timetable. I'm gonna go for help. Wait in the usual place. Nearby, a little boy says it should be someplace right around here, right? Lots of people believe that the little boy saw the note and is also looking around. Though the child could be a coincidence by all means, having seen the note but not being related to it in the slightest, merely the same as we are. Lucky to have randomly found it, or unlucky. So where do we go from here? Many people in that station are from the Unova region. If we make an assumption, we know that we hear a spooky tale at the scary house on Route 14. It bears 6 tombstones, with one being broken, a revive found at it. And the story is as follows. It was a dark and stormy night many years ago. Lost, I arrived at this house and went inside. The lights would not turn on, so I fearfully looked around the house. Eventually, I made my way into the kitchen. There was no sign of anyone being there. I found the fridge, and when I opened it, a faint light leaked out. I could finally make out my surroundings, and I saw the faint outline of a man huddling in the corner of the room. I tried to tell him that I was lost. I was hoping he'd let me stay until morning, but when I approached him, the man suddenly screamed, "Stay back!" I apologized and continued to plead my case. "Please, can't you help me? I'm not talking to you," he shouted. I looked at the man in surprise. When I did this, the man asked me, "Can't you see them? Behind you!" A horde of faceless men. Now, we can connect this actually to Unova, and also Route 14, where Undella Town is, and where the Riches Villa is. A family of rich people who challenge you in a row, 6 in a row. Their house is demolished in Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, leaving an item maniac nearby as most of the family has moved away. Now, we even have a maid on the ground floor of the unmarked office building in Kalos who specifically mentions one of the family members, Master Miles. And through this, we can, kind of make some jumps around. We have 6 family members, 6 stones, though one of them, again, broken with a revive. In summary, the riches move away, demolish their home, tragedy strikes as they are in this spooky house, it gets abandoned, this poor goof makes it here, and crazy things begin to happen. And following the stories, we get to see some of those loose connections to the Hex Maniac who appears in the Riches Hotel in Kalos and may be trying to reach out to these spirits. Alternatively, because of the revive, maybe one of these Hex Maniacs could have been one of these riches. The Hex Maniac is honestly an incredibly strange individual, and I hope we do get some more answers with Legend ZA being here, as I'm very deathly curious, and there's too many holes to create something that is more solid. So for now, let's move on. Charizard ignored Ash due to trade levels. Now, when he got Charmander, it was after Charmander was abandoned. It wasn't a proper full trade. Nevertheless, Ash is not the original trainer of Charmander, and he did not have all the badges to properly keep Charmander trained under him as it grew stronger rapidly and evolved, eventually being very unwilling to work with Ash throughout the anime. As such, this can just simply be explained as Ash not having the badges needed to keep Charizard under wraps because of the trade. Lance's kill count. This all is probably because of the manga, as we could actually start with the idea that Lance hyperbeamed someone in the games, which everyone imagines that dude died, but he actually lived, and talks about how traumatizing that was within Pokemon Masters EX. But because I accidentally read it, I now share with you something from the manga, which is the following. Lance destroyed part of Vermilion City and continued attacking and destroying it as he sought out someone, assuming to be Red. As we then find out the Elite Four under him were ready to basically wipe out most of humanity to create a utopia for Pokemon. All they needed was to defeat Red. What could this mean for Lance and any other version that we see of him? I mean, the kill counts may be a bit up high, but it could have been catastrophically, astronomically higher based on this information, and whew, I really need to read the manga, I'm not gonna lie to you. Nothing matters anymore. I'm slapping the word, when I make that, I'm gonna slap the word genocide up there on the thumbnail, and we're getting more people interested. I'd go watch the Red arc that I covered. We're moving on. God Stone. The God Stone was an unobtainable key item in Generation 5, kind of like the Light and Dark Stones. If you hack it into your game, its description is just something like a very rare stone. There is no use to it, but considering its great color in relation to the other stones of Black and White for Zekrom and Reshiram, it may have been intended for Kyurem. If that is the case, then why does it exist? Kyurem is not a god, but rather the leftover pieces from when the original dragon split into Reshiram and Zekrom, which, considering that is the truth, then maybe the other stones could have been used when Zekrom and Reshiram are slumbering to somehow combine with this one, as Kyurem does with the dragons, to create the true stone, the true dragon, and a god. One last time, I'm not going too deep into this one because I went crazy with the Great War timeline video and all this stuff. Though, I did not include this stone because I actually didn't know it existed. Heart Gold Soul Silver Togepi's father. You get a Togepi as a gift from an egg within the games, and you just don't really know where it's from other than finding out that it's from the Kimono Girls. Now, I actually ended up finding this information from the Ruin Maniac files on YouTube, which the only reason I realized it was the Ruin Maniac is because I got to their channel once I found a deleted Reddit account that had this information, which is wild to me. So I'm going to try and quickly explain this as best as I can without just saying everything that they said at verbatim. Now, since the Kimono Girls seem to have the Togepi and give it to you as a gift, which also seem to have gifted it to Mr. Elm, which is how it gets to you, or even Mr. Pokemon for that matter, then why do they have it? Well, when we look at Togepi and the ideas behind it, or rather Togekiss, it states that it only appears in a world without strife. Along those same lines, within the same game franchise, we find a very similar description of another Pokemon, a mythical for that matter, being Celebi, a Pokemon that does not appear unless it is a time of peace. And when it comes from the future, it is said to bring with it an egg. The idea then is that potentially this egg is a Togepi egg. And considering Cynthia, her time looking throughout the world, and connections with mythicals, there is evidence that she may have actually met with a Celebi, in which case Cynthia, after her meeting with Celebi, actually I believe she straight up did meet a Celebi, sorry for mucking up my words earlier, but because she met this Celebi, afterwards, what do we find her with? A full-on Togekiss. And because the Kimono Girls serve as lore keepers basically of Ekutik and Ho-Oh and Lugia, they are basically symbols of some sort of peace. It would make sense that they would also be gifted these eggs. In other words, Togepi, considering that it is very rare to find in the modern age, only being able to found in unnatural encounters outside of Pokeradar, White Forest, Dream Park, trades, eggs, and Pokemon Legends Arceus, which just has space-time holes ripped all over the place anyhow, might actually be not going extinct, but may just be from the future. Brought back by Celebi, showing us that peace will happen, and that we will get to that point. Elite Four Giovanni. Hope you're ready to listen to more music now. Thank you to a deleted Reddit account with the following. Initially, Giovanni used to be a member of the Elite Four in the Kanto Pokemon League. Why? In the Kanto Pokemon League, after Lorelei, you have to beat Bruno. First, Bruno is a fighting type specialist, but his gym looks more like a rock and ground type gym. Personally, I make that mistake all the time, thinking that Bruno is going to whip me with an Onix. And Giovanni, though, is a ground type specialist. Then Bruno's gym theme, when you listen to it, is straight up the Pokemon Team Rocket Hideout theme. And I will admit, personally, this is the point in theory where everything hit at once and I was bought into the theory, but let's continue. The theme choice isn't uncertain, because Agatha's gym theme is the Lavender Town theme. It's logical, because she is a ghost type specialist. Bruno's gym theme is a Team Rocket Hideout theme, but Bruno isn't related to Team Rocket. Giovanni is. But why would Giovanni be the original second Elite Four member after Lorelei? Because in my theory, they inverted Giovanni and Bruno. In the beta version of Pokemon Red Blue, Bruno used to be the Viridian City gym leader and Giovanni a member of the Elite Four. First, the Viridian City gym doesn't look like it is a ground type gym, more like it is a normal or fighting type gym. Then you find in this gym a karate trainer. Why are they in this gym? And all of his Pokemon are fighting type Pokemon. That trainer is maybe a residue of what the Viridian Sim gym was supposed to be. So in my theory, Bruno was supposed to be the Viridian City gym leader as fighting type specialist, while Giovanni was supposed to be the second Elite Four member. Even when we look at the manga, we don't see any other changes or bring-abouts to this, and this is all the evidence that we have towards it. I think music is a really good signifier in addition to that one trainer, as tiny details always tell us what things could have been. Would this have potentially meant that Giovanni would have had even more power? It would explain why maybe the Elite Four in the manga didn't go after him, or maybe that the Elite Four in general didn't do anything related to him, why he had so much power, why he could have been more than just an 8th gym leader with a plan. After all, he abandons his gym and was seen as somebody that was too powerful, too impossible to beat, making Giovanni bored, while also giving Giovanni the perfect opportunity as someone who is so high up on the ladder to go do other things and nobody would question him except for the people of that city. Which Pokemon Silver stole? No, this is not related to the starter Pokemon. I thought it was and I was about to skip it. In reality, it's actually related to the Cyanwood City man who gives you a Shuckle, because it turns out that Silver was the one that stole Sneasel from him. And as we get towards the end of the game, we do see that Silver has a change of heart. He tries to return the starter Pokemon, but it is shown that the starter Pokemon likes him too much and is allowed to keep it, and this is something that happens with this man that gives us the Shuckle, as when we try to give the Shuckle, if the Shuckle is very happy, he allows the Shuckle to stay with us. We can assume that this Sneasel is allowed to do the same. And on his team, we do see that he has a Crobat, showing high friendship, outside of just this Weavile that he would then have, showing that Silver has truly become a better person. And yes, I know that Weavile is not brought about by compassion and friendship, just for anybody who thought otherwise. And for our finale, we have the Movie 3 original script. It's becoming increasingly known that the initial plans for Pokemon 3 were, to say, extremely different than the final product. As can be read here, the first plan by Shudo Takeshi was to tackle the topic of real-world animals in the Pokemon universe, because only a few hundred Pokemon existed by the time of the Johto era. There were still abundant roles open to real-world animals that didn't have a Pokemon equivalent, and the anime reflected this. such as a mongoose showing up in one episode written by Shudo Takeshi among others. Whereas currently, more or less, Pokemon are the stand-ins for real-world animals entirely. Back in Gen 1, and to a slightly lesser extent Generation 2, Pokemon were treated in the anime and games as something akin to actual monsters, something strange and unnatural that needed to be studied by specialists and, well, 10-year-olds, I suppose. Evidently, the first pitch for the Pokemon 3 was aimed at answering where the animals went, as photographs and records of them existed and otherwise had not been seen for quite some time. The topic of extinction is brought forth again with a T-Rex skeleton becoming an animate, unstoppable force that bulldozes through Palatown and the rocket base. Mr. Shudo had already used the themes of self-existence and coexistence for the first two movies, and so, as he sat in his hospital bed staring up at the ceiling, he decided he wanted to make a film that asked, what is this world that I'm in? The Pokemon world is where real-world animals don't exist. The few appearances of real-world animals in earlier episodes, he says, is due to the animation staff not paying enough attention. So, he wanted to have the third movie tackle this question. What happened to all the real-world animals? Why are there real trees and flowers, but not real animals? What is the difference between plant Pokemon and regular plants? The idea was to have the third movie introduce a new type of creature, real-world animals, into the world where only humans and Pokemon exist. This would have been done with the discovery of a Tyrannosaurus Rex fossil. Not a fossilized Pokemon, mind you, but a real, actual dinosaur fossil. Mr. Shudo's love of dinosaurs came from series such as Shonen Kenya. The discovery of a Tyrannosaurus Rex fossil was, as you would expect, big news in the Pokemon world. Real-world animals used to exist in this world, and records, including photographs of them, do exist, but there isn't anyone alive today who actually remembers ever seeing one. A Darwin-type theory of evolution doesn't really exist either, and professors who try to tackle this problem usually tended to stop what they were working on to move to the countryside to try to figure this out. Orchid Hakase is one such professor. Something Mr. Shudo's blog doesn't really explain is when exactly the extinction of real-world animals took place. The fact that photographs exist implies that this is a fairly recent event, but if that's so, then why wasn't there any theory of evolution beforehand? Did the development of photography happen much earlier in the Pokemon world than it did in the real world? In any case, the eyes of the Tyrannosaurus Rex fossil starts to glow blue, and before long, the fossil comes back to life. It then starts moving forward, walking toward no destination in particular. It crosses rivers and oceans effortlessly, crushing everything in its path, even makes its way through Satoshi, Ash's, hometown of Masara Town. During the film, the Tyrannosaurus Rex would have trampled Orchid Hakase's laboratory. Who is Orchid Hakase? It's Hakase. Oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. What? Professor Oak, Ukido Yukinari Hakase, translates literally to Dr. Yukinari Orchid. Professor Oak. That makes no sense. Yukinari Okido. Yeah, that's what I'm used to. I don't understand what's happening here. I don't understand, but this, I'm direct quoting it as best as I can. Causing the professor to step aside, look at the ruins around him, and say, I thought this time would come someday, but I don't know why it's come to this. So Toshi and his friends, as well as the Rocket Trio, would have spent the movie trying to stop this dinosaur fossil's rampage. The fossil's rampage would have taken it through the Rocket Don's, Team Rocket's, secret base as well, causing the rest of the organization to get involved as well. I'm so sorry, bear with me with all the translations. The dinosaur would have been stopped, obviously, but Mr. Shudo doesn't explain how. So once again, we have the opportunity to see the original idea of what happened to the animals within the world of Pokemon, but nope. And now everyone just continues to argue about what happened to the animals and that, oh, it wasn't canon, so we're just getting rid of it. Oh, or it was just a mistake. I mean, it's a combination of all of it, and I'm holding this as original canon, peeps. It makes things like the Pokemon world way more fun, and I like fun. With that, there are still 4 more sections to this iceberg, and we are done with this part. We might have 2 more parts to this whole series, so with that then, please support the channel through watching other videos, commenting what your favorite entry was or any alternative ideas you may have had, as I do read every comment, and please make sure you do subscribe, share, or even go as far as maybe becoming a member for as little as $3 a month for some lovely perks, as it makes a huge difference for the channel. Speaking of, it's time to shout out all of our members. Starting with the Gods of Hope, Biggins, Heals for Life, and Vanny Lemon, our champions, Andrew Murch, Elizabeth Levicon, Biggins, and Nias Costa. Then are all of our Knights of the Court, Crumbo, Dylan Perrine, Batty Lemon, Double, Plow, Annie Stone, Allen, Heals for Life, and Warren Hemphill. Then, all of our Wanderers, King Pie, Planet Blob, Happy, oh gosh, I didn't put it off to the side of Happy Patamanda, Tempest Zesta, James Wolster, B10s, TS, Joe, Jose Colado, Pokefangirl 23, Michael Gibbons, Konosuga, Guya, Libro Cubicularist, oh my goodness, Dalton Queen, Jers, Brian, Millie, Julian Warner, Dice, Carby, Abdallah Eladi, Ren, Bleeply Bloop, Jack Frost, Zion, Burb, Ariana Scobie, Michael Schrauen, Uncanny Kenshi, Takumi Doto, Varia Bird, Floyd, Quizzical Quackaball, Wraith, Cooper with a Heart, Zakaro, Arc Knights, Issa Kali, Tyrone I, Chris Williams, Astro is Live, Nim the Gudra, Harrison, Alma Elma, Soren, Sun Moon, Jace Chu, Lexovision 420, Taco Sturman, Heelmaru, and Nubig Shoot Past the Limit. Base Lord, Max Supreme, Noisy Bones, Mysterious Militant, The Music Man, P-Cone, BBX, Chris Flame Ninja 30, Bert Toes, Nathan Gressick, Trafo, Undieware, Aries Archives, Brian Bishop, Fan, Meetin, Wolf, Tonico, KC, Denzel 1989, Blaine Cords, Precious Ivy, Celtic Fox, Lucky Charms, The Reverse Clog, Lydia Marie, Cat Mushroom, JMT, Artemis, Katsy, Lay, Brash Candicoot, Nori, Majin, TY, Dennis Amas, What, Hundiafa and Abbas, Muhammad, Ruthless, Hauser, a Rogue, Spartan, Ruby, Switch, Cup Geeks, Jiro, Zetha, the Anime King, Drag Gamer Z, Nathaniel the Hunter, Natrexy, Ocean R, Foxwitch, Ninja Dad, Ace Visconti, Annie C, Disporty Yamper, Jacob Square, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Ryan Smith, Gamer, Hag, Addy Kadabra, Bad Dragonite, Just J, and Venny Samaru, Star, SMD, Hey Belly, Micah 626 Gaming, Muse, Art World, Telumio, Gwendolyn, E-Scanner 072, Andrew Frost, Peak Anonymous, Summon Sloth, Knock Nguyen, Ian Ray, Biggin, C-Night, whatever this is, Corn on a Cob, Malachi Burkhardt, Carlisle, and Heather Weisnett. Thank you all for being members, whether that be gifted or through monthly subscriptions, as it helps the channel immensely. And if once again you want your name stated and credited at the end of every video, become a member for as little as $3 a month. And as always, oh gosh, I messed up my outro. Oh no, I messed it all up. And as always, don't think I want to do. Please be nice to each other. I love you and I'll see you next time.